Good morning and welcome to the ASTROLABE, brought to you by King Pilled. Happy Tuesday to you all. I'm here at last. I know everyone's just been anxiously awaiting my presence. And Josiah is starting us off on a good note. He says, no one ever says nice butt talks after a good toot. Sad. See, Josiah, this is why we keep you around. What would we do if we weren't periodically graced with these great pieces, great nuggets of wisdom from the mind of Josiah? I think there would be nothing left to live for. All right, we got a whole bunch of stuff here today, and got to get myself all situated here. Got my nicotine dosing unit in the lip, and got the coffee in front of me, and I think I'm ready to go. How are you guys doing? How's July treating you so far? I almost said tweeting you. You can tell what I have on my mind. If this is your first time watching here on the channel, the King Pilled channel, the place where you find the real King Pill show, and now the Astrolabe, and soon to come the Alembic from our favorite Zoomer, the king of the Zoomers, Cooper. He's putting together the Alembic, and he told me that he should have everything set up by the end of the month. The man has a full-time job. He drives a truck like a real man. And oh great, he has AIDS again. I haven't talked to him in a couple days. Things have gotten crazy on my end since the mother-in-law showed up, and dog sitting, and my son is just in one hell of a mood right now, like a weeks long mood. Speaking of, I'm glad I said that because I would have forgotten otherwise. I was informed this morning when I went down to get my coffee that that I have received a ticket. This is the ticket that I was given. Apparently, we live with a cop, and anytime that we do something he doesn't like, we get a ticket. In this particular case, I have no idea what I did. I was told something about going too fast. So I think it was often it'll be like earlier. Gaga was eating while she was cooking, so she got a ticket. And I think my wife was playing on the phone, and so she got a ticket. And those are the reasons he gives us tickets. But this time it was for apparently going too fast. And I was also given the ticket was for $2, and here are the $2 that I will use to pay the ticket. I don't know what kind of racket he's building here, but it doesn't seem like it's going to be very successful. I can't imagine that it'll last long. But yes, so these are the gifts from Eastwood this morning. He brought it up. I still have the Happy Father's Day card here. Happy Father's Day with the picture of Daddy and Eastwood. I got to keep these kinds of things around here because the amount of time he spends being like sweet and charming, and the amount of time he spends being just an absolute terrorist are that ratio isn't great right now. So whatever little nice charming things he can do, I have to keep them around to remind me. That segment there was for the three women in the and there's one of them. Kate says, "Aw, there you go. I have now provided entertainment for the ladies." Anyways, as I was saying, do us a favor, like the stream. We've got 16 viewers and 7 likes right now. We should, if tradition holds, we should wind up somewhere between 45 and 55 viewers overall. And we've been ending the show somewhere between 30 and 40 likes. So you guys are doing good. We've got a great audience here. But yeah, do me a favor, like the stream and subscribe to the channel if you haven't. I don't even know if like the notification bell thing matters, because I know that I hit the notification bell for most people that I subscribe to, and I never get the notifications. Maybe I have those particular notifications turned off, and that's why I don't get them, which would be very much that would be a me thing to do. But yeah, I don't know if it actually does anything anymore. We're just kind of bumbling forward with a really shitty, clumsy, awkwardly constructed system because the developers of these systems have priorities other than providing us with a good product experience. I do think this is we've talked about the optimistic view of the future that that we're seeking to manifest here. And I think one of those, I can see a world where in, I don't know, 10 to 20 years, we actually have softwares and stuff that just work, that aren't an absolute nightmare and a headache. Because so much of the I guess the software industry has been corrupted by a mind virus that attacks competency and tries to prioritize retarded things instead of good things. That they don't know how to code anymore. And as we're seeing, there's a increasing demand for people who will just get it done, people who will just fix it, just get shit done. I don't care how. Just get the regulation, get the red tape, get the bureaucracy out of the way. Just get it done. We've got lots of consequences that we need to. We've got a consequence crisis that we need to navigate. That's full of consequences. And if we're gonna navigate this crisis of consequences, then I'm trying to get it out there as much as possible, Jason. Consequence crisis, crisis of consequences, consequence crisis. We'll say it over and over again. If we can just get people out of the way, then we can actually deal with all these consequences. Now, the efforts to get people out of the way, this is the rub. The efforts to get people out of the way can themselves be a consequence of the consequence crisis. And there's a tightrope we got to walk. Anyways, let's get to some of the lighthearted, funny, don't have any relevance on anything except for their entertaining internet content. We'll get those. I've got 4 different clips this morning that fit the bill. The first one here is a special little trick. This is an exercise that you can do to instantly change your mood. If you're in a bad mood, there's a little exercise that this lady's going to introduce us to that will immediately cure that bad mood. I want you guys to play along here. Practice this new exercise for the first time right now.
Okay, just do what I do.
Okay.
Ha.
Ha.
Ha ha.
Ha ha.
Ha ha ha. Ha 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 ha. Ha 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 Okay, just do what I do.
Okay.
I don't know why it's so funny. I'm sitting there watching it. I stumbled across this one last night, and I'm sitting there watching it, and just starting to I'm doing the exact same thing. I'm just laughing and laughing and laughing. And when I first started out, I get the joke immediately, and I'm like, yeah, okay, very funny, yep. And then as it goes on, it starts kind of bubbling up in you, like, oh, I gotta laugh. Come on, it feels good to laugh. And then the more you start laughing, the more you laugh. Laughing is such a funny thing. It's such a bizarre expression. And it really seems like it's basically just humans who can really laugh. There's animals that do laughing sort of things, but there's something spiritual about laughing. It has something to do with accessing some kind of spiritual wavelength that really only humans are tapping into. And the funny thing with it is it has to do with it being unexpected. Like if you know something's coming, it's a lot harder for it to be funny. It can still be funny, but like the overwhelming majority of things that are funny are unexpected. So it's something that's hitting your subconscious, and it does something to your subconscious that produces this kind of compulsive conscious behavior. And then you can become aware of it, and becoming aware of it almost makes it funnier. So it's fascinating. There's a power in it, I think, that even if it's fake, even if it's gay, just making yourself laugh over something will boost your mood. There's something, your body likes it when you laugh. And if your body likes it, then your mind likes it. 2-Bit Podcast says, ever start laughing with your 4-year-old? Same tactic. Yeah. Yeah, especially if you're laughing with someone else and you begin feeding off each other. Like I was noticing her laugh. She's going along and it was funny because she's clearly laughing, but she's laughing like perfectly along this one monotone pitch. And that becomes funny. So I start laughing harder at that. And right when I start laughing at it, then she does this high cackle. So it's like she realized she was laughing on this, or sorry, laughing is so fucking weird, man. And it's cool. I love it. 2-Bit says, when I start going into hysterical laughing all alone to the grocery store, it doesn't have the same effect. Stupid Australians. Well, I did say that it's something that only humans can do. So animals can sort of mimic that, but I would say that probably explains your problem there, Jason. You need to return to the land of human beings. The entire land of Australia is telling us in so many different ways that human beings don't belong there. And yet we refuse to listen. So here's another one. I absolutely love these types of game shows. This is probably the best export that Asia has ever made. And we don't even get to see it. It's interesting. All these little games. 2-Bit says clacking sticks intensifies. You had to be there. All these sorts of these games of chance. Isn't it interesting how many? I mean, this one here was edited, so they may have just been picked, like kind of creating the narrative themselves for the video. Because it's a lot funnier when one guy keeps getting it over and over again. These games of chance, and this one here isn't exactly a game of chance, but it's a more a game of skill. But to some degree, it is a game of chance. And these games of chance always wind up, like, objectively, there's a 50-50 chance no matter how many times you do it. It doesn't change. This would be what the objective math would say. But it never seems to bear out that way. There always seems to be long strings of just one result happening. It doesn't cleanly go back and forth. Yeah, I know if you do enough, then it would. But we don't live in a hypothetical where you've done enough. We live in the world that we live in right now. There's only one reality that we're experiencing. And in the reality that we're experiencing, even though the objective odds are 50-50, the actual experienced odds are probably more like 70-30 or something along those lines. I notice these kinds of things because one of my hobbies is watching weird esoteric physics stuff where people are really questioning our standard conception, the Einsteinian relativity model, and it's crazy how many things are downstream from that, but also what that the type of mind that would conceive of a model like that would only come from a certain set of philosophical presuppositions. And it's those same set of philosophical presuppositions that bred all of the social retardation that we have right now. So it only stands to reason that if those are the minds bringing to bear that philosophical presupposition, and like that means they're only going to see certain things. Their paradigm is only going to allow them to see certain things. So when you're dealing with like the fundamental levels of reality, and you want to be sure that you're seeing everything there is to see, then your presupposition is going to inform what you actually see. So if your presupposition blinds you to seeing certain things, then it's kind of like it's like going out using looking for unicorns using a device that's designed to find everything except for unicorns. You're not going to find a unicorn by definition. And then if you conclude, well, okay, unicorns don't exist because my unicorn finding device told me they don't, then you're not living in reality. You've deluded yourself. So there's there's a big school of thought beginning to develop around. It's been all the people, the cast-offs, the weirdos, the rejects, the loons. But it turns out if you ignore those people for long enough, pretty soon they stumble upon something. They might run through a whole bunch of really weird, stupid stuff, and they may not be have the proper presuppositions to bring to bear to see the whole truth, but they may not be presuppositionally biased against seeing certain things that are actually there. Hopefully this all makes sense. It's kind of abstract, but this is the way that my mind is processing it. So we've lived in this world for 100+ years now where at the absolute base levels of reality are completely unquestioned assumptions that just lurk in the back of our mind. We just presuppose them without even thinking about it. Things about the shape and position of the earth and the nature of gravity and the sun and the moon, all the different celestial bodies and their relationships to us and the cycles that they go through, and all the way to the nature of like what's this around me, what's in here, what's air, what's air made up of, is, you know, all of these different assumptions are super fundamental. They literally inform the reality that we perceive around us. But they're also rooted in a philosophy that is predisposed to not seeing certain phenomena. So if those phenomena, those spiritual phenomena, the more esoteric phenomena, if those actually do exist, whatever that means, whatever it means for something like that to exist, well, all of our experts right now are operating with tools that presuppose they don't exist. So they're not going to see them, whether they're there or not. We can't, using the tools of modernity, we can't actually see those things. We have to use different tools in order to see those things. So it requires some sort of a rebellion against modernity, which is generally going to happen from the underclass, the cast-offs. And those become the new minority that everything begins to revolve around. As those things, you know, now you add in all the communications technologies that we have and the ability to make ideas go viral, and all of those things, like, these are just amplifying this effect. And of course, all this is happening. This stuff is starting to leak into the mainstream. The stuff that's going to completely like explode people's brains and completely rewire the way they interact with the world around them. This is happening at the same time that we're experiencing mass political instability, and we're right on the cusp of some type of great transition. Maybe we're even experiencing that transition already. We're sitting here waiting for it to happen as we're experiencing it happen. Kind of like you're sitting there bracing yourself. You're going to go through a drive-through car wash, and you're like, am I in it yet? Am I in it yet? Am I in it yet? But it's been, it's raining really hard outside, so you don't notice that you're actually in the tunnel until all of a sudden you look around. Oh, wait a second, I've been in the tunnel for a really long time. That's my sense of what our progress through the transition is right now. So add in having a massive revelation about the nature of reality, and we're poised for very, very interesting times. I did this stream the other night with Meta Prime on Twitter. That did one of the spaces, and we were talking about the disclosure of dark tech, and afterwards I was thinking about this word disclosure. So disclosure, what's that? This is like the opposite or the removal of closure. So if you have disclosure, it's like something that brings new questions, new problems, and you don't have closure on them. They've been disclosed. They've been opened. They've been revealed, which now leaves a question. What do you do with them? How do we return to this space of closure? And it's interesting that we have this inclination that we want closure. We don't even question that. We're just like, yeah, of course we want closure. It's something about the way that we as human beings exist. Something about our nature is that we want closure. We want to seal things. We want to solve things. It's in our very nature. So if disclosure is coming, then that means lots of closure is going to follow thereafter. Who knows how long it's going to take to get that? But I think it's really easy for us because of the presuppositions we've had baked into us about the nature of the human mind and our connection to the external world and all these sorts of things. Because of that, it's really easy to see ourselves as in a like a completely full set. Like the boundaries have been maxed out. There's nowhere to go. Everything is fully expanded. So then we assume in order to go somewhere else, then we have to have some sort of an explosion and collapse and a reduction in size back to the beginning point. So now we have room to expand again. But what if the set itself can expand? What if that set is already expanding? And our perception of its boundary point, think about something like the national debt. We have this perception, we don't have any record, any history of any nation that's ever been able to maintain this level of debt. What if that's not the case? For a variety, this is the thing about these sorts of revelations, is that they open up almost infinite new possibilities. And you can see the new possibilities as threatening because they are. It creates instability. It creates chaos. But it creates a form of chaos that people are inclined to solve. Whereas we're living in a chaos that masquerades as stability, so nobody wants to move because it seems like if I don't move, I'm safer. But that could just be that you're so used to that kind of instability that you don't realize how unstable it is. So you're like freezing and not acting is much more unstable than actually acting. Because of the nature of reality, as you begin to act into it, it begins to act back into you, is a way you could think about it. You begin transforming the nature of reality with your actions, with your behaviors, no matter how mundane. And then human beings we have things like a collective consciousness where groups of people will have a soul itself that can form and act. This sort of thing is not allowed for within the standard model, or they really try to science it up and take the personality out of it. But if you do that, then all you're doing is studying dead souls. But you're not studying a live soul to see how a live soul behaves. So little people who begin to act in their own little mundane ways, all pushing in the same direction, all pushing in any direction, it has a ripple effect. And I'm speaking of this, I'm not saying this in metaphorical terms. I'm saying this in as close as you can fathom to actual physical terms. What physical means is being newly understood. We don't have because there's like, okay, physicality is all that exists. And then there's a move from that, which is that physicality isn't all that exists. There's also spirituality. But these are like separate domains that exist independently of one another. So that it's like a progress forward in understanding, but it's also backwards still. In reality, there's a spiritual reality and a physical reality, and this is the same reality. It's one reality. And human beings exist as a bridge between the poles of this reality. I just realized that my mic is really low, so I'm just gonna leave it. And if the audio on my mic and the video clips are really off, then let me know and I can pull them down or something like that. That way I'm not blowing you out. And you could just turn your volume up a little bit. If that doesn't work, if you think that I'm too quiet and I should move up, then let me know and I'll. It's really easy. I can just flip it up. But everyone's used to this now, so I don't necessarily know if I should change it. CB says the economy is another good analogy. You're like, is this a recession? Is this a recession? Oh, it was all the time. Yeah. That's a more, it's still pretty esoteric. Like the economy is a very sort of spiritual concept itself, but that's a more accessible analogy for a lot of people because they hear about the economy. That's the thing, is that there's a lot of these spiritual concepts that we naturally use. They exist in our language. They exist in our conversation. We'll talk about like the vibe in a room. People are talking about a vibe shift. I see Richard Spencer. He's talking about a vibe shift that's coming. That's getting a little more esoteric, but we'll talk. You could talk about like the spirit of a man, or we'll talk about the like having team spirit, these sorts of things. So we do think about the world in these terms. But it's like it's latent. There's this discordance between our subconscious and our conscious mind that doesn't. It exists somewhere in the code, but it's not being replicated on the GUI. It's being assumed, but it's not actually being applied or represented, the graphics user interface. John Lloyd is here. What's up, man? He says, spaced out and totally forgot to tune in live yesterday. Well, good news for you is it's recorded, and you can go watch it on YouTube after you finish this stream. Mike Menestrone says, lots of software is gay because it's been built to last a year and no longer. Right. Just get it done isn't competency in technology. Yep. So there's a lot of priorities that have to be realigned in order to actually be presuppositionally predisposed to creating good technology. And that's to borrow two terms from Jason with the 2-Bit podcast, that is the bitter white pill about the consequence crisis, is that it creates the incentives for actually realigning your presuppositions. These aren't going to happen on their own. It's not like you could just sit around and wait for all the important people to get their incentives realigned. No, you have to play an active part in this. That's what this means. The elite have gotten degenerate and corrupt, and the masses have gotten degenerate and corrupt. And we sit around and point out everyone else's degeneracy because our degeneracy manifests in different ways. For some people, it may manifest in stripping down naked and peeing on another guy out in the street. And for other people, it may manifest as spending all of your time thinking about how bad everything is rather than going out and making one thing better. And then doing another thing, and then another thing, and then another thing. These are equally degenerate. One just happens to hit us on a gut level more. But they're equally destructive in the long run. So the bitter white pill of the consequence crisis is it's a great opportunity to begin solving problems. And you can actually then be able to make a stamp on what the future is going to be. Because now you're a participant. You're playing in the game. You're no longer just part of the scenery. You're actually an active participant. Wit says the transition to the age of Aquarius from Pisces is here and people feel it. Indeed. It's very interesting, Aquarius and water. And how many things about water we keep hearing? And that there's also these discoveries being made about the nature of water and the hydrogen network, a hydrogen communication network, the fundamentalness of hydrogen, what it is, where it comes from. These are all very interesting things that are being explored right at the time that we're entering into the age of Aquarius. All right, that was a whole long, I don't know how a video of a couple of Asian dudes in masks snapping each other on the nipples with a giant rubber band led me down that little rabbit hole, but it did. And I've got a couple other quick things to show you here before we get into the good stuff. We're already half an hour in, man. 2-Bit podcast, picking up garbage in your neighborhood is the civic version of the Jesus prayer. That's a banger. You should tweet that. So check this out. We got both points of view. You know how you see a thing happen on the internet and you're like, let me not spoil it. You see something happen on the internet and you're like, man, I wonder if I could, what would it be like to see the alternative view? And there's something, when you get multiple angles of the same event, it's like your brain wants that. Oh, let me see the other angle. Let me triangulate. Let me try to get multiple perspectives on this. Because we seem to innately understand that multiple perspectives provide more information, which gives you better problem-solving capability. Not always the case, but it's a little rabbit hole we run down. So here's one. Here's an internet happening where we actually get both perspectives.
All right, door's open. Get the fuck out.
He's got a turkey in his truck. Whammo! R.I.P. Turkey.
Well, he didn't make it very far.
Yeah, he didn't make it very far. Yeah, here's the turkey. Turkey's just hanging out there, jumps out, gets obliterated.
That was the craziest fucking thing that ever happened. 70 miles fucking per hour, a fucking bird. What the fuck, dude? That was the craziest fucking thing that ever happened.
Imagine you're just driving along, and all of a sudden, whammo, turkey goes right through your windshield. He's lucky that he's just got a little bit of blood on him. You can't even tell if that's his blood. Might just be the turkey's blood. But yeah, that turkey's ready for Thanksgiving. Okay, one more funny bit, and then we will get into the meat of the show. This has all just been the buildup. So my wife sent me this. I'll just play it for you guys.
And a buddy of mine orders from Jerry's Deli, very famous Jewish deli. We ordered a bunch of food, and there's supposed to be a 6-piece of mozzarella sticks, and they only have 4.
This is true.
This is a true story. It's a very famous Jewish deli. They send somebody out, and they bring us 2. It's supposed to be a 6-piece. They deliver 4. He calls and complains, and they drove 2 out. Okay, they didn't give us a new one.
They drove 2 out.
And he called him and said it was the most Jewish thing he'd ever seen in his life. And they banned them from the restaurant. They had him on a list. It was the opposite of Schindler's List. It wasn't even a close ride. Like, it just give a 6-piece, man. What's the matter? He drove 2 mozzarella sticks. I move out here, and
man, you know it's going to be a good story whenever the speaker starts morphing into a balloon letting out air. Oh, man. The story itself is funny, but the fact that his laugh is so intense tops it off. There's something great about that too, because the delivery was absolutely perfect. I'm sure he must have kind of had it scripted in his mind, but he's laughing so hard at it, yet he still manages to deliver it perfectly. You could tell he can't even contain his own laughter. He's being overcome by the hilarity of this story, and yet he still manages to pace it right, and it's just an absolutely perfectly made joke. Mr. Westford said that made my day. Good. I'm glad. I've got some more funny Instagram videos that I've highlighted, but most of them are, maybe I need to get into TikTok to get the actual like stuff that's more not strictly just entertainment, but it's also kind of educational, because I want to do those, but I'm wary to do too many of them on YouTube because I don't want the stream getting taken down. It's kind of annoying when that happens. So speaking of YouTube, there was a guy left a comment here this morning, and it was actually related directly to something that I was already planning to share. Let me see if I can find this. Okay, so on the episode from June 26, Astrolabe, June 26, homeschooling, moon landing, Urania, and can't remember what else. Stray Buster says TikTok is low-key based. It is interesting that it is the place where a lot of this, off-limits content is able to proliferate a little bit more. At least the stuff that gets there's some of the stuff that's off-limits in that it gets suppressed. The flat Earth stuff, the Tartaria stuff, the mud flood stuff, all this stuff, it gets suppressed, but it doesn't get banned. Like, it's not something that's going to get you, it's something the regime doesn't want you to know about, but it's not something that they're going to actually go after you because they don't want a Streisand effect, some of these things, which makes you wonder. So on YouTube, it's just impossible to find content on some of these things. The algorithm is boosting all of the debunks, and the debunkers are doing way too well. We have a culture that promotes debunkery, and the debunkers need to get shoved in lockers. So TikTok is kind of the platform where you could do a little bit longer form than just Instagram, and the algorithm seems much more open. You could find just about anything that you search for on there. I was looking for. I'm getting my first haircut in like 5 years, maybe, on Friday, and so I was looking up like styles. Like I want to say like this is what I want, and just show it to the barber. So I'm trying to find something, and there's not very many white guys with beards with dark curly hair that's long. This is a pretty narrow sector of people, so finding comparisons is difficult. And I'm looking on YouTube, I'm searching on Google, can't find anything. And then the thought occurred to me, well, try TikTok. So I went to TikTok, and there is everything. So many abundant options available. I was like, huh. Well, TikTok, the app, sucks. Like, using the app sucks. I can't stand it. To me, it's as bad as Instagram or Facebook. I hate using the app itself. But the content on it is it's a whole new world. There's not another platform that's really very much like it. And in fact, I think this may be one of the reasons why Rumble hasn't taken off the way that it could, Rumble and Odyssey. I think they could take off even more than they already have, but I think some of that's probably being suppressed by TikTok. Cooper, why are you tagging me in the comments? Is there something I'm supposed to know? You just trolling me? Anyways, Standout Deviations commented on the stream yesterday. He says, I love the stream. It's my new favorite. And he spells favorite Favourit, so he's one of them. He says, the only thing that drives me crazy is when Yanks talk about how America is always going to do better than everyone else. It's this weird cultural perspective based on a constant immersion in their own overwhelming media-saturated country. I don't think they really understand the true ethnic identity and culture. They just think they do, and their strong sense of rugged individualism can never actually compare. So I think this is a fair comment. I also think the comment misunderstands some of what I've been talking about. It's a reference to some of the stuff we talked about in that episode. And I talked about the us being in the beginnings of the American empire. We're growing into the American empire. And I think that America is on its ascendancy into power. It's not getting weaker. It's moving in the direction of getting stronger. And I don't say this when I say America, I don't just mean the political entity, the United States of America that exists right now. I'm talking about this geographical region. And I think that on the trajectory that we're going, America being stronger than everyone else is a geographic phenomenon. It's a function of geography. It's a function of national will, because I think there is an American personality. I'll address that in a minute, the rugged individualism, American personality. I think that does lend itself toward risk-taking and all that sort of thing, and that's something that's being discovered. But it's geographic, economic, and like circumstantial. It's not. I'm not saying, well, America's going to be the best because fuck yeah, America. But that also is the case. But I'm saying even if I didn't live in America, I would have the same opinion. Just looking at the available data and kind of tracking the direction of things. And really, any honest person outside the U.S. is saying the same sort of thing. You're seeing Bukele was talking about this as well. You're saying, like, obviously, like you have immense wealth. Even if a huge amount of it is in monetary terms is fake, you have immense wealth, immense resources. The Mississippi River, like the inland waterways that America has, its ability to defend itself, having massive oceans on either side. America's not gonna face some sort of military invasion except by being subverted by its own people. These aren't going to be outward phenomena that can do this. And even then, it's still whoever takes over the American continent, even if the existing people are overthrown and eliminated, every single natural-born American is shoved aside. All of these geographic and economic and what's the term? Like agricultural resources, all of these factors mean that whoever has control of this plot of land will have the inside track to being the strongest political entity on the planet. I think this is something that is, you could say, oh, well, there's been people have controlled this continent in the past and they have it. I'm saying that this is a trajectory. This is like an inevitable trajectory. So when we experience collapse, which collapse is not like fall into dust. Collapse is like retreat back 100 years in certain terms. Like it's collapsed down to a lower level of development. So then, okay, Cooper posted, he texted me what he'd said. He said, debunkers are gay, homosexual faggots who like cum and cocks and eating ass and piss, but the hall monitors at YouTube are oppressing him. Damn the debunkers. Okay, so like Witt says, the U.S. will always be a superstate, right? So whatever the political structure is, I think the U.S. is going to continue being a superstate. So when I talk about America always doing better than everyone else, that's what I'm referring to. It's not simply, oh, I think America is the best and I'm a proud American and therefore I have this irrational belief in America. It's like people who I hate are describing this reality. And I agree with them. I think it's correct. And as America maintains its superstate status, the regions immediately adjacent to America are going to be pulled into that orbit, and they're going to be benefiting by proxy from that. So Canada, the reason why Canada exists as a semi-functional first world type country is because it's right next to America. Nothing about Canada's social structure would be functional if it didn't have the most powerful superstate in the world right next to it. Mexico would be a much bigger tire fire without being able to benefit by proxy from America. This isn't to say that America hasn't also contributed to their degeneracy and is artificially holding them back. I think America, its current government processes are artificially restricting the whole continent. But that means those things are taken away and the whole continent is also going to rise. And relative to everything else, it's going to rise more. So, relatedly, I have this. I appreciate the comment because I do think that there is definitely a phenomenon of Americans just being irrationally optimistic about their own country. Not nearly as much now as there was 20 plus years ago. But I lived in Canada for 3 or 4 years. I went to high school in Canada. So this would have been 2002 to 2006. And I love Canada. I think Canadians are wonderful people, and at least, natural born Canadians are wonderful people. I think it's a beautiful country, and there's a lot to love about it. It also, I just can be honest about what it is. The rugged individualism thing, I think this is part of America realizing its status as superstate is also the discovery of the American identity. Because America doesn't really have, America has things that it's known for, and we have the initial formula for the identity kind of percolating under the surface. There's been different times throughout history where you've really seen a rise in something beginning to approximate American national identity, but then it gets co-opted and subverted by many of the same characters that exist to the east of America. So America has continued being a proxy state for various other foreign interests, and that's diluted the actual formation or discovery of the American identity. But America, as it is currently constituted, has only existed for a couple hundred years, which is a very short period of time for a superstate. So we haven't even really discovered what does it mean to be an American. This is a constant battle. What is America? What does it mean to be an American? Is America an idea? Is America a geographic location? Is America a specific type of person? These sorts of things are being hammered out. And again, we think of ourselves as being like at the fullness of the set. The set can't expand any further. So as things are now is as they will be, or things will go. There'll be an explosion and a collapse, and everything will go back down, and we'll start the process over again. But I don't think that's the case. I think that the set itself can expand. So we get really focused in on our current time period, but they take the perspective of a historian 500 years in the future, or 1,000 years in the future, looking back now, which first of all, you have to assume that that's even possible, which I think a lot of people have given up on. I think a lot of people assume that the world's not even going to exist for much longer than another couple decades, which is a really poisonous mind virus. That's what breeds apathy and inaction. If you believe that the world is going to keep on existing, and it's only a question of how well we're going to do that, then you got to get going. So if you take the perspective of a historian 500, 1,000 years in the future, how do they look back at this era? And they would say, well, okay, so America existed for the first couple hundred years, and there was these little internecine factional disputes, and then there was a centralization process, and then there was a subversion by foreign powers for a century or so, and then they hit this big turning point, and there was a massive economic crisis all over the world, and who knows what happens going forward. But it's very reasonable that we see the identity of what it is to be American and what America is be established in like a sustainable way, something that's going to exist for centuries. What America is going to be known for, that personality, is TBD. But that rugged individualism is part of it, because there is a distinct American psychology that other countries don't have. And that has existed. People have observed the American psychology from a distance for centuries and said, these people are a different breed. De Tocqueville was doing this in the 19th century. 19th, 18th, 19th century. Way back then, he was like, yeah, these Americans are a completely different breed. They are just wired differently. Which is probably a selection effect of the type of people who would be inclined to come to America. Anyways, so this ties into a good tweet from Eugippius again. I have an interesting little theory that I'm working on. And I'm trying to think about... No, I said theory. Stupid phone. I did not say Siri. I have this theory that I'm working on that America is actually not a Western nation. I've always thought of it as that, but what if America was actually an Eastern... Like our spirit was actually Eastern. Our history was Eastern. Very interesting thought. I need to find more substantiation for it before I really try to make the case. But if it was true, if that was a possibility, that would have very interesting, very interesting downstream effects. Or if you would say that America is like the synthesis of... It doesn't have a Western spirit or an Eastern spirit. It has an American spirit, which has some of both, but is also different. These are the sorts of things that consume my mind when I'm thinking about the present and the future. So, Eugippius here. Eugippius, no idea how to pronounce it. So he's quote tweeting someone who's quote tweeting someone saying, "Happy Canada Day," with a comic says, "Oh, Canada, sure we have our differences, but let's at least be grateful for one thing. Thank God we're not America." And Cosmist Russian says, "Remember, Canadians read the New York Times and Washington Post and imagine that all of America is a turbo-red fascist state. They then adopt a mirror image posture to define themselves against this America, paradoxically becoming turbo-American libtards in the process." I think that puts it pretty concisely. Americans, and I could vouch for this, having lived in Canada, that Canadians think about Americans way more than Americans think about Canadians. This is just part of being the little brother to the superstate. It's not, for me personally, it's no hard feelings. I love Canadians. I love Canada. I think it's a beautiful country. It's fascinating. I love the Canadian spirit. They're very kind people. It's almost like in a sense, it's almost like a country full of Mormons, where you know how like every single Mormon you ever meet is just really nice, really kind and sincere and engaging. That was my experience of Canada. I even had a Canadian accent while I lived up there, because I'm someone who takes on accents. When I'm around people with an accent, I just subconsciously take it on. I'm also my family's originally from Minnesota. So Minnesota, yeah, sure, you betcha. That I heard a lot of that growing up too. So Eugippius says, "This is the small country effect, whereby smaller countries in the shadow of more dominant nations will attempt to outcompete them on virtue, at least. So if we can't outcompete you economically, we can't outcompete you militarily, we can't outcompete you commercially, we're going to outcompete you on virtue." This effect explains not only Canada, but also a lot of Euro-progressive leftism. American progressives then use our more virtuous politics and lingering Eurocultural prestige to argue for similar policies at home. This is kind of the Build a Caesar effect in, except it's like in reverse. If America would get out of Europe, this entire progressive leftoid feedback loop would suffer a serious setback, and a lot of really dumb policies would be much harder to sustain. So there's a funny phenomenon here where, if you imagine, this isn't actually possible for individual humans, but if you imagine a younger brother growing older than his older brother, or in a more realistic sense, the younger brother having higher status than the older brother, that would be the relationship between America and Europe. The term Europe kind of is starting to really grind my gears. Like, people talking about a European identity. There's no European identity. There's so many different reasons why there can't be a European identity. So the only European identity they've been able to craft is not America. So Europe has put themselves into dialectic tension with Americans. Well, at least we're not American. And then we've got all this history. But there isn't a European identity in the first place. And it's not the same as the US, where you could come and you could have some colonies that exist for a little bit of time, but then have a full national identity take over those colonial identities and bring them in. That can't happen in Europe. Europe's been around way too long. These identities are way too deeply embedded in the individual European countries, which of course is why they have to try to eliminate those identities. This is like a pragmatic political move. If you're wanting to consolidate Europe into a single political entity, by necessity, you have to abolish the underlying identities. But those identities are much stickier than the American colonial identities. They've been around much, much longer. They've got way more history. So we're seeing the European project collapse. Jerome Powell and Jamie Dimon are ensuring that this happens. They're bankrupting the European countries, which is, again, what's going to just facilitate the ascendancy of America to true sovereign superstate status. So there's a funny dynamic here. So you've got Canada, who's like the little brother to America, and sees themselves as not Americans, and that's really the only identity that they have. Then you have Europeans who also see themselves as not Americans, but they have a much deeper identity that reaches much further back. They've been around just much longer. Now, all of these all exist in the orbit of America, even though America has not actually had its own sovereign status. It's not experienced that yet on the superstate level. It's been occupied by foreign governments for virtually its entire existence. It's the creature of foreign governments. But the American identity itself that they've imposed these constraints upon is a real thing, because of the selection effect of the type of people who went there to populate it in the first place. They were already predisposed to be a certain type of people. Those were the types of people who formed the native-born populations here. Anyways, interesting thoughts. Let me know what you guys think. Let me check the comments here before we get to our next story. Okay, yeah, that one. CB, I describe Europe as a confederation. They are very cooperative with each other. Yeah, they are. But we're also seeing that I think we're going to see that continue to break down going forward. I think that there's for economic reasons, it's going to be a simple matter of survival. I think those identities, those European identities, are much deeper than this sort of crisis can actually dig out of them. Like, if you believe these kinds of identities could truly be embedded in someone genetically, which I do think is the case, then trying to dig that out will fail before it can be successful. Time is not on their side. Witt says European oligarchs want to be a superstate so badly. Yeah. Yeah, and it's just the big thing that's working against Europe being a superstate is the opposite of what America has. So for Europe to be a superstate, it has to import its energy from somewhere else, as long as our energy domain is as it is right now. These sorts of things could change really dramatically with a discovery of a new form of energy that might not be quite so regionally specific. Whether this is drawing energy from the atmosphere, drawing energy from the earth, or other sorts of things, I think that's a distinct possibility. But for the time being, Europe is they can't sustain themselves as an entire political sovereign unit. They have to be able to maintain relationships with external actors, to be able to import the resources they need to function with the population levels that they have. And so increasingly, just as a matter of efficiency, them trying to consolidate into this super corrupt wannabe super state is just killing all of them. It can't survive. It's killing itself off. And so this again is what continues to elevate the status of the United States as a single sovereign entity, because there's nothing else that can compete with it. CB says, I agree, a biospirit is real. It's the reason you like specific flavors and foods your ancestors ate. Right. And it's even more than just liking them. In many cases, they're like nutritionally necessary for you in a way they aren't for other people who don't have the same ancestors. Different bodies respond differently to different types of nutrients, and it ties in very much with where their ancestors came from, how far removed from their ancestors they are. And, so someone from let's say someone from some like tropical region probably shouldn't eat cold water fish. But someone from Scandinavia can probably eat cold water fish and not have the same issues because they've grown up with it. Vorpal Anvil says, well, I am German and do like beer. Yeah. I'm American and I like nicotine. Mr. Westford says, do you think America would be stronger if we had stronger state identities, like a stronger Tennessean identity and a strong Florida man identity? Like, I'm European, yes, but I am an Italian. I don't know. I haven't really thought about that. My instinct is no. I think that those identities, the people for whom those identities are real, they're very real. So they're going to be sustained for a period of time. But I don't think they're going to proliferate to the same extent. I don't think they're not going to have the centuries to establish themselves and really take root in a people the way that, say, Italians or French or Austrians or Turkish people, like all these different other identities, I think have a much older, deeper root. And so I don't really see them persisting beyond just affecting their own regional area. Now, I do think that maintaining those local identities is good, being able to maintain those local identities, but I think that they have to be contained within the larger whole. So maybe that is what you're saying. Maybe I do agree with you. Cooper says, the idea of robust local state identities developing is insane with the internet existing. Yeah, that's a good point. Ryan Isaac says, I think the sub-identities of the U.S. are detached. Romanians still see themselves as Dacians or Romans. Romulus and Remus statues all over there. Yeah, those when your identities you could trace your heritage back 1,000 years or further. Those things are just much more deeply rooted than like Tennessee existing has been 200 years, 250 years, something like that. And for a large portion, and the most recent portion of that, it's been significantly diluted. So I think those identities are going to remain and they're going to persist, and they are good. But I think the American identity is really going to overwhelm all of them. CB says, good point. Western food ravishes Polynesians. They die at like 50 on a Western diet. Yeah, that's also because a Western diet is fucking awful. It's not even a diet. Josiah says, America is a synthesis of the subsidiary identities of Europe. Okay. Next story. We gotta buzz through this. I've still got a whole bunch of tabs. This one here. Someone's alt. So the ACLU tweets, all the libs are freaking out about the Supreme Court. Breaking! The Supreme Court ruled today that cities can punish unhoused people for sleeping in public, even if they have nowhere to go. We cannot arrest our way out of homelessness. Now, when I was a lib, by that I mean a libertarian, I would have sympathized with this. Oh yeah, arresting a homeless person, like that doesn't solve the problem. Buck Johnson says we actually totally can. In fact, you're then giving them a home. Well, fair point. But I really like this response from Come On Just the Tip. He says, the addendum that we can't arrest our way out of homelessness reveals the chasm in worldviews and values here. I don't want bums arrested because I think it will solve the problem of bums existing. I want bums arrested because I want to be on the streets of my town with my family without being assaulted by degenerate drug addicts and their accoutrement. To the 2020s Prague, everything is about solving the root causes of something or otherwise pointless. What is the point of cleaning up one oil spill if it doesn't solve the problem of future oil spills? Now, if you've been listening to this show for a little while, you may recognize that mental construct existing in people who may not identify as 2020s progressives. But this shows they share that exact same posture. What's the point of doing this thing that is better right now if it doesn't solve the big problem in the long run? In fact, if it doesn't solve the big problem in the long run, then it's not better now, it's worse. Anything that you can do to address this problem, even if you're saying, I want to address this problem, even that, nope, all you're doing is you're perpetuating the problem. You're thinking like a progressive. This is how the progressive thinks. We can't do anything. We need to allow all the bad things to continue existing because anything that we do to address the bad things doesn't address all bad things ever. Therefore, it can't happen. This is a libertarian perspective. This is the way the libertarian thinks. It doesn't get rid of the state, so he's not there to abolish the state, so I'm not voting for him. It's the same mindset. Will says, has the topic started yet, or is it just random chit-chat still? That's the main problem with this channel. The analysis is good once you get there. I appreciate the feedback. This stream, the ASTROLABE, is all about the random chit-chat. We start with the fun stuff, then we get into the deeper stuff. Speaking of deeper stuff, we've got, someone mentioned this in the stream yesterday, Mike Benz talking about the conspicuous absence of a letter from the intelligence community on whether Biden should stay or drop out. Now, I think he makes some really interesting points here. And I want to present what he's saying and also an alternative reading of what he's saying. So let's put this up to 1.5 because we've still got a lot of other stuff to get through. And let's go.
There is a conspicuous lack of a letter from current or former members of the U.S. intelligence community about whether or not Biden should stay or drop out of the race. This is something everyone's talking about. We just heard, I think Kanakoa put together a 43-minute clip compilation of Democrat Party operatives calling for Joe Biden to drop out. The New York Times is calling for it. Bill Kristol is calling for it. It's a ton of heavyweights within the DNC calling for it, but Biden and his close family have come out and said they're staying in. And I've been looking at two things this whole time, trying to, guide it from my predictive lens. And the first thing is why, if they're going to replace Biden, you would think that one of the most effective ways to do that would be to be getting 25 or more signatories of members of the CIA, Pentagon, State Department. Basically, you get a bunch of intelligence community people together because they love doing that on political matters, on foreign policy matters, on national security grounds. This is a major national security issue. The commander-in-chief cannot keep his eyes open past 4 p.m. in the afternoon. His brain malfunctions, worse than we're talking like single-cell organism, amoeba-type brain capacities once the clock strikes 9 or 10 p.m. You would think that not only the guy in charge of U.S. foreign policy, but the commander-in-chief of our armed forces, this would be something that you would see General Michael V. Hayden weighing in on from the Pentagon side, from the CIA side, from the NSA side. You'd be seeing Michael Morrell from the CIA side. You'd be seeing John Brennan. You'd be seeing James Clapper. You'd be seeing a reprise of the 50.
So if we had a national security state that was actually concerned about U.S. national security, then the people who are in charge of national security would presumably be weighing in on something like the mental competence of the chief executive. Whether they're saying, no, it's good, he's fine, he had a bad performance, but everything's all good. They would either be saying that, or they would be saying, no, there's legitimately an issue here. We, the experts, are weighing in to say, we need a competent executive in place. Now, of course, this is assuming that the people in charge of national security actually care about national security, which is the problem. National security is just a euphemism for turn the United States into an economic zone for the sake of foreign interests. But even the guys who that's their posture, even if their posture is that national security means turn the United States into an economic zone for foreign interests, they would still want to at least maintain the appearance of their office. So they would feel obligated, okay, we have to say something. So if they're not saying anything, that's telling. That is data. The lack of data is itself data. Now, there's a few different ways that this can be interpreted then, that this can be understood. I'm not completely sold on any of them, but he's going to present at least one, and then I'm going to present one as well.
One spies who made such a big deal out of the laptop letter were all the different, 30-plus intelligence officials who had always signed a joint letter whenever Trump did something mildly interesting. Why is the intelligence community silent about where they fall on this? If they really wanted Joe Biden to be out, I would expect them to have mobilized already. And the fact that they are staying silent on it, to me, and again, I could be wrong about this. I'm not putting clout coin on this. I'm not making a prediction. But I would have expected if they were really going to get Joe out, that you would have the heft of the U.S. intelligence community behind it. And I don't yet see that. The other thing that I'm watching are the Donilon brothers, Mike Donilon and Tom Donilon. This is something that is basically BlackRock. I mean, that's really what this is, right? These are both Mike Donilon is the soothsayer. He's okay, let me back this up a little bit. Tom Donilon is like an apex predator of the national security state. He was, basically national security advisor, so that's oversight of intelligence. He was, I think, chief of staff for the State Department under Bill Clinton. He also did a ton of stuff for the military. He hit the hat trick of, highest levels in the U.S. government of all three corners of the blob: the Pentagon, the State Department, and the CIA, and did White House stuff. And now Tom Donilon is the head of investments for BlackRock. So he's the guy who basically decides where the $10 trillion of BlackRock allocations go. His brother's Mike Donilon. Mike Donilon is the senior advisor in the White House and the guy who has been the political advisor for Joe Biden since 1981. So the brother of the guy running BlackRock's $10 trillion in investments and where portfolio companies or industries they go into, his brother, the current highest advisor in the White House currently, Mike Donilon, his brother has been the guy who has been essentially the political advisor for Joe Biden for now 42 years. So there was this thing, I think, in Axios where they talked about the oligarchy, the Biden oligarchy, and they make it sound like it's Biden's family. It's like Hunter and Jill. But you read that article, they say plus a handful of select White House advisors. And I guarantee you, Mike Donilon is considered family for that purpose. And so when the family said that they are going to be supporting Joe's continued run, I don't think that means Hunter, Jill, Ashley. I think that means Mike Donilon, and that means BlackRock still wants him in. Listen, when that changes, I'll revisit my analysis. But as I see it, the intelligence community wanted Boris Yeltsin as the president of Russia because him being pliant meant there was no possible pushback. It was turned over to the oligarchy because there was no strong executive to hold them in check. And I think they know that Biden will greenlight everything as he's done. So I don't think it matters to them. Now, the other part that I find really interesting about this is it's quite possible that the Democrat Party folks who are
okay, so quick summary of that part. Essentially, the Biden family, when they talk about the Biden family, this is not just people who have Biden as their last name. This is the people around him who who installed him in the first place, who have been handling and managing him, and who want that thing to continue going. They've got projects that are underway with the expectation that they're going to have this presidential administration and the next presidential administration. They've been banking on this happening. So they don't want to try to shift course. Because these sorts of things are, when you have a really low resolution, kind of juvenile view of the regime coalition and how it functions within itself, how the different pieces interact with one another, you might be like, oh, well, BlackRock, they could just buy out Trump and just make him do what they want and they just have business as usual go along. But it's clearly not that straightforward. Potentially, theoretically, they might be able to. But this assumes that Trump, again, and Trump means the same thing. Like Trump is a figurehead for a coalition. He's a more powerful representative within that coalition than Biden is within his. But he is still a representative of a coalition, which means that the Biden family has to make a deal with all of that coalition. Or they have to try to pull members of that coalition away, which means they need to offer a better deal to them than they think that they're going to get being part of the Trump coalition. And clearly, whatever this Trump coalition is, it is seen as very difficult to stand down. The entire regime is freaking out about it because it's not a nothing burger. The Trump coalition is not, I'm going to say Trump. Whenever I say Trump, unless I specify otherwise, I'm not talking about the individual man himself. I'm talking about the entire coalition forming around him. So if BlackRock just wants to make a deal with Trump, and if it was so simple as, oh, they could just make a deal with him and then move on with business as usual and everything would be hunky-dory, then you wouldn't have the hair on fire, the mass collective meltdown and freakout. Everyone would already have their marching orders to just pivot to Trump. You would see the media change their tune. The media would turn to, well, you know, Trump is blah, 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 but, you know, look at all these different people who he has around him that will control him and discipline him. And Biden has all these different issues, and it would be great if we have him. But really, Trump, if you really sit down and look at it, he's more just kind of like a 90s Democrat. And so he's going to give us these things, and we're going to get those things. You would get something like that if it was as straightforward as just pivot to Trump. But the regime is not a single operator. And even the most powerful operators within the regime are not so powerful that they can simply wield events as they see fit. They wield managerial power, which has to operate within a certain range of acceptable options. And if they're going to make some huge move, some huge recalculation, a complete shift in like decades-long plans, they can't just do that on a dime. And they don't have the sand in their pants to just bend everyone else's will to them and get everyone else to drop all of their own pet projects, which happen to fly directly in the face of the Biden family projects. Again, the Biden family being this larger extended network of Democrat operatives and financial power brokers. So very clearly there is a split. There is multiple splits that have happened within the regime coalition, and they're not. This isn't some gigantic united oligopoly that all moves as a single blob. It's multiple different blobs that are all jockeying for power with one another, and they're not ideologically committed to remaining a blob. They're committed to doing whatever is going to be in their best interests. And if that means abandoning one coalition for a new one, so be it. And if that means compromising on this or that social or economic issue, all right, we'll make that work and we'll readjust things on this side.
Concerned about Joe Biden's health are worried about losing the election on the basis of votes. But the folks in the intelligence community may be keyed into other aspects, I'll just say, of how the election might be determined that, shall we say, are agnostic about the question of votes. What comes to mind immediately is the situation where you had Ted Cruz, the Republican senator from Texas, who I did a video on this. He gave up like 35 holds on Biden appointees, all for a floor vote on removing sanctions on the Nord Stream pipeline. This is like 2 years ago now, or 3 years ago. And not even knowing that the State Department and the CIA and the Biden world folks had a plan to blow up the Nord Stream pipeline. So he gave up all that political capital for nothing because he just wasn't read into the plan that was happening above his head and above his clearance. And there could be something very similar here.
I do think that that's is a really interesting point to bring up. I wasn't aware of this. So Ted Cruz basically sacrificed a whole bunch of political capital to try to achieve a desired end, not knowing that achieving that desired end was pointless in the first place, which tells you something about Ted Cruz's position with respect to the regime. He's part of an adjacent coalition. He's like an adjacent coalition member. But he's not inner circle. He's not part of the dark room that people might imagine. He's very clearly on the outside because he did something completely retarded that would not make any sense whatsoever if he was actually part of the inner circle. CB says the left is calling for Biden to abuse his power after the Supreme Court ruling exactly what they said Trump would do in a second term. A mask off moment, but it's just another mask. I like that last sentence. It's very good. And this was one thing I wanted to touch on today. I had some stuff related to the reaction to the different Supreme Court decisions, and I decided to save that for another one because I have so much otherwise. But I am very curious to see The fact that the Supreme Court has handed down these opinions on various things with respect to the power of the executive that seem to be empowering the executive in a lot of ways, will that be capitalized upon? It seems that the talking heads didn't expect it to go this way. So did the behind the scenes people expect it to go this way? The people that actually might be movers and shakers for various types of opinions. So to what extent is Biden going to capitalize on that? Again, Biden being the whole Biden family. To what extent is Biden going to capitalize on this potential new source of executive power between now and January? This is shaping up to be very, very interesting. And it still hasn't changed my opinion on the trajectory of things. Because I think when it's difficult to take all these data points and align them all together and figure out which ones are most important and try to create a coherent narrative out of it. It's just like every day there's a barrage of new, like if you're trying to calculate a trajectory, you're getting a barrage of new pins that you have to put up on the cork board. You have to figure out how they all relate to one another. But the regime itself has backed itself into a corner where the posture with respect to Biden now, seeing him as incompetent, seeing it being made evident, even to dyed-in-the-wool libs, that this whole thing is a charade. It's entirely a scam. I have my lib progressive sports circles that I operate in, and I've just been lurking and listening to them comment on these sorts of things. And they're no less, the TDS isn't going away. This is like Seattle and Southern California. The TDS isn't going away, but the will and the belief in the Democratic Party is like at an all-time low. They're like, this is a complete charade. It's just a facade that they've built up. They've been lying to us all along. I can't believe we've been suckered by them. We literally have no alternative. Is there a third-party candidate? Oh, no, just that anti-vaxxer guy? Oh, man, we're just totally screwed. America is dead. There's nothing else to live for. Like, this is the sentiment among them. They're incredibly demoralized. So I've talked before about black swan events and that this has been a technique used by the NATO, UN, Davos, Atlanticist coalition where they manufacture black swan events to try to suddenly tilt the playing field and try to capture some power from it before things resettle. But that's a technique you can only use so many times. Now that everybody's on high alert of like, wait a second, we're being ruled by a corrupt oligarchy that has bred incompetence into everything and all the structures are breaking apart. Injecting more instability to that with sudden moves, sudden unprecedented sorts of moves, is only going to breed even more demoralization and lack of faith in the regime. So he brings up the point that it could be that the national security people aren't weighing in on this because they're already settled. They already know the election is resolved. They know that there's no that. Well, what can I say here? You know, as he said, that they're agnostic to the actual vote counting for a variety of reasons. And I think there's probably something to that. I do think that they have some fail-safes, but I don't think that it's the same way as last time. I don't think that those same techniques are going to work in the same way. Because it's a new Republican Party. It's a Republican Party that is more aggressive on those fronts and also has the attention of every important person in the world right now. It's generally accepted that the last election, the actual result of the election was not legitimate. That there was some funny business. And there are people who are like, yeah, there was some funny business, but it was necessary. But a lot of there's a lot of people who are like, yeah, there was funny business, but it was necessary. We thought it was necessary at the time, so we didn't really say anything about it. But after the way the last 4 years has gone, we really want this election to go a different way, and we don't want more funny business. So the more funny business, it's the same as the Black Swan event thing. The more funny business they try to engage in, the more they're undermining their own credibility, and the more they're pushing people to Trump. So I think they're their hope, their expectation has been that some of these legal charges are going to stick somehow. They're going to get some wins in the court that are going to bolster their ability to just use sort of the same technique as last time, where the media just goes full blackout on even questioning anything, and the courts just rubber stamp it, and everyone just kind of turns a blind eye and moves forward. That's not going to happen again. There's way too much skepticism and building willpower against that sort of outcome that they're not going to be able to just skate through. So it could be that the national security figures aren't concerned. They aren't releasing a statement on Biden's competence. And this could all change. Like, they could release a statement while I'm talking right now and all this changes. But the fact that they haven't already, I think, indicates incompetence on their part. And it also indicates the extent to which the tough corner that they've backed themselves into. Because not releasing a statement makes people question them, question their priorities, question their incentives. Releasing a statement in one direction, saying Biden is incompetent, cuts against the interests of some of their major patrons. Releasing a statement that says Biden is just fine and hunky-dory could have profound professional consequences for them down the line. And the fact that they're not doing that, because that seems the weakest. It seems like it'd be really easy for them to just release a statement and say, yeah, he's fine. So then that begs the question, well, are the national security guys, are they actually on Team Biden? Have they been on Team Biden? Or have we just been led to believe they are? Or maybe they were before and they aren't now. The fact that they haven't released a statement, no matter what, leaves lots of unanswered questions. CB says, morale isn't your happiness, it's your willingness to fight. They're losing the political will to fight just as we are gaining it. I definitely didn't have this on my 2024 bingo card. Yes, exactly. My lovely wife, is tuned into the chat. She says, just tuning in, did he play the mozzarella sticks video? Yes, I did. I played it already, and it was a hit.
The intelligence community is not freaking out about this, and you don't see like a letter from the intelligence community calling for Biden to step down. It could be because they are apprised of things in terms of what may be done, even if Joe Biden were to lose an election fair and square to make sure that Joe Biden remains president. And so they may not be freaking out because this election may not be determined by the voters, shall we say, whether that's by fraud or whether that's through lawfare, whether that's through the alternate electors scheme, whether that's through any of the dozen plans that Norm Eisen and Mark Elias are working on those regards. So the fact that they don't seem to be weighing in strongly, calling for Biden to step down, suggests that they think that Biden is likely to win anyway, even though the polls are showing now the polar opposite. But they have a weird sense of confidence about this, is what I'm saying. And I find that very disturbing.
Okay. So, our next story. Bukele. The wins keep stacking up. Breaking. El Salvador President Nayib Bukele says the culture ministry will fire 300 employees who he said were promoting agendas, quote, incompatible with the government's patriotic and family values vision. He mentioned something along these lines in his conversation with Tucker, that, they something to the effect of them still having people who are not necessarily cooperating with them. But the Bukele train keeps steaming along, and he's making all the right moves. The government wants to cultivate patriotic and family values. There are people operating within the government who are going to be fired because they are promoting agendas incompatible with that. And this is the way that a functional organization would work. You could think of this in company terms, and you have the CEO of the company. They sit down, they're having a board meeting or what have you, and there's members of the board who are arguing, no, we shouldn't do this, we need to do these things instead. And finally, the CEO says, you know what, guys, it seems like we just have a difference of opinion here. You guys value different things than we do. You're standing in the way of us accomplishing what we want to, so you're going to be fired and you're going to be replaced with people who can do your job. This is executive behavior. And as this continues, it's going to create more and more demand for true executive behavior. The Build a Caesar operation is well underway. And the wins are stacking up. The replies are interesting. America needs to do the same thing, but fire 80% of our government. This is why Trump needs to select Vivek Ramaswamy to be his running mate. There were so many employees in the federal government, some I knew, that were working to undermine his agenda. It made me sick. Reminds me of this patriotic president. We need someone like that here. We need to do this very badly in America. Nayib Bukele is doing everything right. He's leading the way. This guy impresses me more every day. He's his own style of Malay in Argentina. Values and standards count. The reason why their crime rate dropped so much is because he shipped them all here. He actually did not. He's been trying to get them back. Is he going to use helicopters? He should use helicopters. We need more of this all over the world. Now, obviously, the replies to a tweet about Bukele on X, replying to leading report, this is obviously a very, there's a massive sampling bias here. But one of the fascinating things about the internet, I actually had a story about this that would have fit in well here, but I'll have to do it another time. One of the fascinating things about the internet is that you can have these internet platforms where anybody can just go and commentate and participate in the conversation. And you can find yourself being a total anonymous person, some random dude that nobody knows, having a conversation with a billionaire. What this also means is that many of these billionaires or not even billionaires, just powerful financial, commercial, political figures who happen to have some amount of curiosity and sincerity about them, they've existed in a bubble, in a complete cultural, social bubble for a long time. But they can stumble their way into interesting little circles on the internet where the same thing that happens to us, random anonymous people, because at the end of the day, the wealthy, powerful people are just human beings acting within their perceived domain and acting on their own incentives. And they can have their brains rewired on certain issues in the exact same way that we can. So many of us, I'm sure there's 51 people watching now on YouTube. Of all of you guys, I would imagine there's a very small percentage of you, if you're completely honest with yourself, that you would say, yes, I have the exact same outlook on the world and political persuasion as I did 4, 8, 10 years ago. The vast majority of us have come online, so to speak, as we've come online. And this isn't something that's been restricted to just the plebs. It's happening to people who actually have wealth, power, and influence. The difference with them is that when they have their minds rewired by various conversations on the internet, they can actually do something about it. And it doesn't take very many of them to start trends. There's a number of prominent figures, the guys from the All In podcast, Bill Ackman, Elon Musk. There's a number of them who are playing footsie with the online shitposting crowd, but they're being affected by it. So this sort of thing is very interesting because there's a lot of people out there who appreciate competent executive power, and they don't think that they haven't seen a manifestation of it. Sometimes they don't even know what they're missing until they see it, and then they see it and they're like, oh, so it is possible. Oh, this is an interesting view. That's why you get someone like Tucker beginning to talk like Curtis Yarvin. Amy appreciated the wealth, power, and influence drop there. I knew somebody would. Will says, sad thing is the average American has no idea Bukele can even exist, so they can't demand what they don't know can exist. Right. Well, the great thing about that, the bitter white pill there, is that the average American doesn't even need to know, because the average American doesn't have any influence over all this. They actively make decisions to ensure they have no influence over all of it, and they will just pivot and fall right in line when the winds of change start blowing. Another Bukele story. This is from the day before. That last one was June 29. This is from June 28. View tab. The president of El Salvador, Nayib Bukele, launched the Zero Leisure Plan so that all prisoners in the country have to work for their food in prisons and repair the damage they've done to society. Can this man get any more based? I'm sorry about the audio blipping on that. Hopefully you guys couldn't hear the staticky sound. That was driving me crazy. It turns out that when you clean all the criminals off of your streets, you now have a gigantic labor pool to begin using to re-beautify your streets. Isn't it amazing how that works? People are worried about the homeless. Oh, these homeless people, you can't criminalize homelessness. Well, what if you criminalize homelessness and that means you give them a home and a job and they get to earn their way back onto the streets? Imagine that. Imagine if people had to earn their way into the privilege of living in a polite society. That you know that every single free person that you see has earned that right to be free. Isn't that an interesting thought? Will says, God, I love him. Just give me zero capital gains tax and I'm there. I'm not going to lie. Like, I've been to El Salvador and Guatemala. Absolutely loved it. This was 20 years ago, so it's definitely changed since then. But that is not out of the question for me and my family to wind up somewhere like that. My wife already has an aunt who lives in Belize, so we wouldn't be far from family. It's just, I don't know. I'm an American. I want to be in America. One more. Speaking of beautifying things, Bukele tweeted this out on June 29. He just said, beauty. Oh, to have leaders who appreciated the power of beautiful architecture. Judge Maddie said, man, there's so many Maddies showing up around here. We're going to have a brawl to determine who is the true Maddie. Judge Maddie says, I'm ready to pack. Am I too old to learn Spanish? Definitely not. Spanish is very easy to learn. It's got very simple rules. English is a much more difficult language to learn. Spanish is very easy. And there's tons of all languages, of all other languages in the world right now, Spanish for an American would probably be the easiest to learn. Very easy to immerse yourself in it. Very similar to English. And it has, like as an example, think about the vowel sounds in English. You have A. This isn't A, it's A. Or E, E. O. Our vowel sounds are really kind of complicated. Whereas you have in Spanish, the vowel sounds are A, E, O, U. That's it. Every pronunciation, it's going to be, if you see an A or an E or an O or an I, it's going to be pronounced A, E, O, U. So it's very easy. There's there's rules about where the emphasis will land that are, as far as I'm aware, like There we go. Am I back? I'm going to give it a minute here for everyone else to let me know whether or not I am back. No idea what happened, apparently. Okay, good. I'm back. Excellent. Thanks for sticking around, guys. Apparently something with Google Chrome and Safari and Restream just broke because the stream is still up. I reset the I turned off the Wi-Fi, turned it back on again, restarted Google Chrome, and I could see the stream was still going on YouTube, but it wouldn't let me sign in on. It would let me log into Restream, but then it wouldn't allow me into the studio. But it worked on Safari, so whoop-de-doo. All right. So let me close this out. We were talking about Bukele. I think we basically finished what we were saying about Bukele. So we'll move on to the last couple of stories that I've got here. And this episode is probably going to go a little bit longer than 2 hours because I've still got some good stuff. Okay, so our next subject here is Bannon. Let me just get my windows realigned. Our next subject is Steve Bannon. Okay, let's see. Allow to share window. Okay, share this window. All right, here we go. Things are a little bit different with Safari than they are with Chrome. So Steve Bannon was dropped off at prison yesterday. He's going to be there for 4 months, conveniently released just before the election. Plainly, he's just a political prisoner. This is exactly what he is. And we're going to watch an interview in just a little bit. But interestingly, when he's dropped off at prison, look who was there with him. Blackwater founder Eric Prince. And check out what Eric Prince had to say. How is that for a statement? Clay Martin says, that is the most menacing understatement perhaps of all time. If you've been paying attention to... No sound. Oh, for crying out loud. Hold on. It's not giving me allow to share. Let me think. How can I do this? It's not giving me the little dialogue box to share audio along with it. Okay. Hold on. Bear with me a sec, guys. I'm going to try something else. I'm going to see if it'll let me back in on Google Chrome now. Because this is going to put a real big hitch in the giddy up if Safari is not going to share sound. Okay. There we go. All right. Hopefully everything's back to normal now. No idea why Restream decided to be an asshole today, but it did, and I appreciate you guys bearing with the boomer tech issues. All right, so we'll play this one more time. Clay Martin.
I would also say we turn my friend Steve Bannon over to the guards at the prison here. We will be here in 4 months to collect him in good health, maybe a little thinner and in better shape, but we expect that they take good care of him or there'll be accountability for that as well. And I would also...
There will be accountability for that as well. There will be... He's saying there will be no Jeffrey Epsteining happening here. Steve Bannon is as he said, there's a really good clip he did, an interview he did with Tucker. I think it was maybe only 20 minutes long or so, but talking about this fact. It was posted on Tucker's show 2 weeks ago, maybe. And he basically just said, this is obviously trumped up charges, but I'm willing to be a political prisoner because I think he recognizes the political capital that can be gained from really championing his cause as a political prisoner, and he can become a pawn that can be used. So he's willing to sacrifice himself for that. I do think a little bit of that is, celebrity making, but I also think he's got someone serious like Eric Prince in his corner talking this way as well. Eric Prince has his own connections. And if we're operating from the premise, as we've talked about in a couple recent shows, that the Pentagon is perhaps not fully or perhaps not at all on Team Biden. Well, there's plenty of people within the Pentagon who hold deep respect for Eric Prince and for Steve Bannon, for that matter. These are a couple of very popular, very respected men. So I think they recognize the power of sometimes the powerful thing to do is to submit and allow yourself to be violated, allow yourself to be made a victim, especially if you recognize the power of, or the reality of the fact that the scapegoat mechanism has been broken by the cross. So allowing yourself to be scapegoated is actually a very good way of gaining and amassing power. It's basically a dare. It's a bet. And he's genuinely putting his life on the line. Bannon is, with this bet. So say what you will about Bannon. I've got my own things I'd quibble about with him, but he genuinely is putting his life on the line for this particular political bet. So I've got to respect that. I have another Bannon clip here I wanted to share with you guys. Joe Allen tweeted this. He said, this ABC interview is heavy metal as all hell. Bannon controls the frame from start to finish. Jonathan Karl is left squeaking into Pitbull's jaws. Every time Karl comes with some limp gotcha question or a schoolmarm accusation, Bannon cuts him off and chews that little rat's brain. Heads on pikes, squeak, squeak. Bannon rolls his eyes and reminds Karl what town he's in. Victory or death, squeak. Bannon schools Karl on the crazy concept of a historical reference. Scipio Africanus, Horatio Nelson, and William B. Travis all use the same phrase. Election denial, squeak. Bannon, have you asked a Democrat this question? Yes or no? The answer is no. These media rats should know that when Bannon emerges from prison, the pit bull's going to be hungry. Now, I haven't actually watched this, so I'm going to experience it with you guys. I saved this one specifically so I could do this, so we can get a live reaction. Of course, if I'm going to sit and watch it, 12-minute clip, we're going to put it on 1.5x. And I hope to God this is not something that's from YouTube that's going to take the stream down. If it does, just go over to X and watch it there. And as soon as the clip is over, it'll come back on here. And I've got 2 other threads to go through after this. There'll be one on Project 2025. The Libs are figuring out what Project 2025 is, and they are horrified. And then the last thing is DEI for white guys. But before we get to those, let's watch this clip of Steve Bannon dissecting Jonathan Karl like the squeaky little rat that he is.
Only 2 other men in the history of this republic, General Washington in the Revolution and the Foundation, and Abraham Lincoln in the Civil War, had the personal fate and destiny of an individual be inextricably linked to the fate and destiny of this republic. Donald John Trump is the 3rd person.
Steve Bannon was an architect of Donald Trump's 2016 campaign, his chief strategist in the White House, and later of the effort to overturn the 2020 election on January 6th. He is going to prison tomorrow.
For what it's worth, I know there's plenty of the people in My Struggle by Steve Bannon, the book he works on until he gets out. Yes. He mentions Abraham Lincoln there, and I know there's plenty of people in the audience who probably aren't big fans of a sort of hagiographic reference to Abraham Lincoln. And I would say that fundamentally what Bannon is recognizing here is the power, the generational power that can be derived when a governmental system becomes identified with one man. So Bannon is Bannon's a brain. Bannon knows exactly what he's doing. He knows exactly his position in history and what he's trying to bring about. So think what you will about Lincoln, but there was power in Lincoln, the archetypal figure being identified with the government and the executive power that brings about. And if you can control that guy, then you could be the Wizard of Oz. You can be the guy behind the curtain.
To serve 4 months for contempt of Congress. We decided to go see him in the basement of his Capitol Hill townhouse, the place where he broadcasts for 4 hours a day a show called War Room. It has a large following among hardcore Trump supporters. Why did we decide to interview Steve Bannon?
Hardcore Trump supporters, he says. I happen to know for a fact that the viewership of War Room is not just anons on the internet. Or I should say, some of those anons on the internet are far more than anons on the internet. War Room has viewership in very high places. Bannon is someone who is held in extremely high regard by very powerful, influential people.
Did so because Bannon has a direct line to Donald Trump. He is perhaps Trump's most important outside advisor. If you really want to understand what a Trump return to the White House would look like, listen to what Steve Bannon is saying. So I saw recently, while you were on the air doing your show, Donald Trump called.
Hey, Mr. President, I'm live on TV. Can I call back? I'll call you back, sir. Thank you.
How often are you talking to him?
I don't want to talk details, but we keep in pretty good contact. A lot of the things we talk about end up in his speeches, so we talk frequently enough.
Steve Bannon's worldview echoes loudly in Trump's speeches, with retribution, a central theme of Bannon's War Room, a cornerstone of the Trump campaign.
In 2016, I declared, I am your voice. Today, I add, I am your warrior. I am your justice. And for those who have been wronged and betrayed, I am your retribution. I am your retribution.
Some of those.
You could tell when you hear Trump say those sorts of things that those are not coming from Trump. I saw someone the other day say that Trump has a vocabulary of like 80 words that he just uses over and over and over again. And because of his force of personality and his nonverbal speech, he manages to say a lot with those 80 words. But when he ventures outside those, he gets very descriptive language like, I am your retribution. You know that's coming from someone.
Who served Trump and crossed him say they're worried. Stephanie Grisham, who was the communications director, the press secretary, communications director for chief of staff for the first lady.
She's not talking about people like that. That's ridiculous.
She says that she's worried about being charged with treason. That she disappeared someday.
That's absurd. I'm talking about people in positions of authority. For instance,
Andrew McCabe, the former deputy FBI, he says he might leave the country.
He ought to be very worried. He's definitely going to be investigated. So is Comey. So is Esper. I believe Milley will. People, look at what happened in. Look what happened.
Milley, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, former chairman of the Joint Chiefs.
Yes, because look at the we don't know conversations he had outside the military chain of command when he's chairman of the Joint Chiefs, when he talked to the Chinese, when he talked to Nancy Pelosi. We have to investigate all that. We haven't done anything. You shouldn't worry.
Well, they're worried because Trump and you are talking about retribution.
It's not retribution at all.
That reminds me of something I tweeted recently. There was a headline going around about how there's FBI agents who fear they may have to flee the country if Trump is elected. And my reaction to that is, if you're an FBI agent who thinks you should flee the country if Trump is elected, then you probably should flee the country. If you're actually making that admission, that's very telling.
No, first off,
wait, those were his words, not my words.
He says your retribution. And what he says by retribution, he said, like he said last night at the debate stage, his retribution is a very successful, more successful second term. What we're saying is we want justice. We want to have full investigations, and then if criminal...
That was actually a really good point that Trump made that I think was underappreciated. It would have been nice if it would have been, if people would have latched onto it a little bit more. And I would say that this is where we can come in. Trump said, my retribution will be success. Success for the country. That is very powerful framing. My retribution against all of you who have come after me and persecuted me and my allies is going to be making the entire country more successful and wealthy. That's going to be my retribution.
charges come up, then criminal charges come up.
I mean, you made a promise on your show. You said that the attorney general will be in prison.
100%.
So you're not just talking about investigation. Is Bill Barr on the retribution list?
I think Bill Barr has to be investigated. Not retribution. You keep talking retribution.
No,
why you start
because Trump said retribution.
Justice.
And you said retribution.
Justice. It's justice.
So Bill Barr needs to be investigated.
Bill Barr
needs to be in prison with Merrick Garland?
I didn't say that.
Well, I'm asking
I didn't say that. We have to see. I'm not going to prejudge somebody. We have to see.
So Bill Barr could be going to prison.
It's not retribution. It's justice.
Just days after the 2020 election, Twitter suspended Bannon's podcast. The episode also yanked from YouTube after he seemed to imply that Dr. Anthony Fauci and FBI Director Christopher Wray should be beheaded.
I'd actually like to go back to the old times of Tudor England. I'd put the heads on pikes, right? I'd put them at the two corners of the White House as a warning to federal bureaucrats. You either get with the program or you're gone. A couple of days before, I was talking about the execution of Thomas More, when metaphorically they put it on the pike. That is a metaphor. In this town, Jonathan, and it's beneath you to bring it up. In this town,
it's not
in this town, you say, let me just say, hang on a second. In this town, 1,000 times a day, people go, we got to put the heads on pike. We have to put his head on a pike. It was a metaphor.
You're saying at a time when Anthony Fauci and his family are facing death threats, when Christopher Wray and FBI agents all the way down are facing death threats, and you're going out and talking about putting their heads on pike.
Notice what's behind him up here. See the icons? That's very interesting.
A total metaphor. Anybody understands that. That's your overreach. By the way, they banned us, I think, on Twitter. They banned us on Facebook for that. And hey, guess what? The show got even bigger. So not that we care. I'm not backing off my
Are you
rhetoric.
concerned about those death threats, though?
That's not. What do you mean death threats?
No,
Do you think I don't get death threats and have security all the time? That comes when you play at the highest levels. It just comes.
Bannon, who served as CEO of Trump's 2016 campaign, is adamant that come November, Trump will win.
Right now, he's going to win by a landslide. It's going to be 340, 350
Okay,
votes.
so this will be
Stephen
easy.
Bannon.
So this will be easy. Will you appeal right now, message to all of Trump's supporters, to respect the
Are you
results,
going to pull this
win
again?
or lose?
This is your question.
And
Have you asked a Democrat this question? Yes or no? The answer is no. Have you asked a Democrat this question?
I haven't seen Democrats storm the Capitol to try to stop the election.
Have you heard Jamie Raskin? What Jamie Raskin's saying about January 6th? That he would not. So the court ruled
By the way,
9-0.
I have no problem asking Democrats if they're going to.
Then why don't you do it? Then? You've got no problem. The only reason you're going to have it, we put a pitchfork to you back and say, why don't you ask Democrats? Ask some Democrats. Here's the bottom line. When this is adjudicated and reviewed, if they are certifiable, chain of custody, ballots and votes from American citizens, then hey, whatever that outcome is totally fair. Until the time that we get that, all bets are off.
And I'm talking about violence. Will you say no matter what, no more violence? What's violence? Well, let's just look at some of your language. Your language. You said
there is no coming together, just like in the Revolution and the Civil War. One side is going to win and one side is going to lose.
How's that violent? Just like the Revolution and the Civil War.
Well, no, but you're talking about the two great historical moments in our history,
which include a lot of bloodshed and violence.
You're talking about. Nobody could derive that we're calling for violence.
Okay,
Hold it.
Oh, no, how about this?
We're winning at the ballot box. You know why? Over 50% of the American people right now, including 80% of Republicans, believe the 2020 election was illegitimate. That Joe Biden's illegitimate because of problems with the 2020 election. Okay.
Well, they believe it because a lot of people have lied about it. Quite frankly, you also said it's victory or death.
It's very simple. Victory or death.
Victory or death. I did. Scipio Africanus, Nelson, Travis at the Alamo. It's a famous saying for when you want people to say, hey, we got to win. You got to put ultimate effort. Do you know why we're winning now? Do you see why we're winning? Because people.
You know what this reminds me of is the quote that I can't remember the exact phrasing of it, but that politics is war by other means, or politics and war are on a continuum. And you could see very clearly that the squealy little rat here doesn't know what time it is. Bannon knows what time it is. In the past, these sorts of political loggerheads, when groups of people would come at up into political loggerheads like this, that's what would happen. There was warfare. There was outright warfare. We live in kind of a post-war world, sort of, where on one hand there's war all the time, but on the other hand there's much less war. Because we've bought into this, and I think this isn't entirely a bad thing. We've bought into the fiction that we don't have to fight these wars with literal weapons. That there are ways of fighting wars, quote unquote, non-violently. That doesn't mean that there's no place for violence, or that violence isn't going to happen. And there's a very good chance that if you, like with little boys, if you raise little boys to never fight, you don't let them get into fights, knock down, drag out, kicking, punching, taking away dueling from society. Actually, these things make society much worse. This is the Longhouse. The Longhouse comes in and says, no, little boys shouldn't fight. Oh, it's appalling that men would stand 15 paces apart and shoot at each other. Oh, this is horrifying. But those are little constrained types of violences that allow for the constrainment of violence overall. When you take those things away, you actually get much more violence. Because people who are not experienced with violence don't know what to do with it when it happens. So the violence becomes much more chaotic and disorganized and unconstrained. You need the constrained application of violence. So the desire to eliminate all violence is actually one of the most violent impulses. And this is the Longhouse. Vorpal Anvil says this is all part of the feminist society we have now. Right. Because men gave up their right to engage in violence with one another and submitted it to this fiction, we've actually bred a world where there's much more potential for violence, and where the violence is much more explosive, or has the potential to be much more explosive when it actually happens. Trying to eradicate violence is a violent impulse.
Inspired by that. They're volunteering hundreds of thousands, an army of the awakened. That's what Biden's going to meet come October and November when voting starts.
Well, I saw an army of protesters attack the Capitol on January 6th, 2021.
The day before a pro-Trump mob stormed the Capitol on January 6th, Bannon told his podcast listeners,
all hell is going to break loose.
For weeks, he had been predicting a revolution.
Isn't the point that it's all converging, and now we're on, as they say, the point of attack, right? The point of attack tomorrow. And all I can say is strap in. The war room, a posse You have made this happen, and tomorrow it's game day.
You spoke to Donald Trump on the morning of January 6th. What did you talk about? I don't remember, but it was something I'm sure the normal course of business. Remember, let's go back to January 6th of what you guys, I'm sure you're
Normal course of business.
No, I'm sure you're going to cut. I'm sure you're going to cut it to where I said, "Oh, hell's going to break loose." Look what I said as the predicate. That day, what was supposed to happen is those states we're going to have, I think, 12 hours. There were 6 states, 2 hours per state, 7 states, 14 hours per house to debate the actual receipts.
Trump rarely gets specific about what his second term would look like, but Bannon does, pointing to the work of Trump allies like Project 2025 of the Heritage Foundation, which outlines a plan for replacing career civil servants with Trump loyalists throughout the government.
If Trump wins, what does it look like? How is this different from the last?
Career civil servants. It's such a neutered, anodyne term. They're just career civil servants versus Trump loyalists. Someone who's a servant of Trump versus someone who's a servant of civil.
President Trump hasn't signed off on these, but look, here's what's going to happen, I believe. 3 verticals. First vertical is seal the border in the mass deportations. The second vertical is about the finances. So Trump's going to have to deal with a budget of $2 trillion of deficits. He's going to have to look at getting the tax cuts back. And the third is to stop these endless forever wars in Ukraine, in Israel, and around the South China Sea and Taiwan. That's the program of what he's going to drive to say we have to accomplish this. So I think a whole big part of Project...
That's probably useful to keep in mind. Those are the 3 verticals that if Bannon is talking about these things, then Bannon is not the single say-so of everything Trump, but he is one of the most prominent and respected and trusted voices among the people who are dedicated to Trump's agenda. Again, Trump being not Trump the person, but Trump the entity. So the 3 verticals are immigration, sealing the border, stopping the foreign wars and everything that implicates, which Bannon is fully aware of what that is, and the economic state of things, financial policy. So those are the 3 big vectors.
2025 is actually going into the apparatus, the post-constitutional Leviathan, and start to take apart the administrative state brick by brick.
No, I understand.
Jonathan, I have 900 pages right here of just one. This is just Project 2025.
Yeah.
This is just the Kevin. This is just Heritage. You've got the other groups.
Because you had said that the deep state had thwarted Trump over and over again in the first term.
When I interviewed Bannon back in 2018, he predicted an astounding victory for Republicans, saying they would run the tables in the House. Instead, Democrats picked up 40 seats. And in 2022, he predicted a massive blowout for Republicans. Instead, they lost most of the competitive races across the country.
The 2022 did not come out anywhere near what we thought.
I mean, all your guys lost. I mean, you had people like Kerry Lake and Masters,
Can I say something?
Mastriano. I mean, these guys.
Let me make sure ABC News understands this.
Okay.
This is a populist nationalist revolution. It's a process. We're not going to win every election.
So you may not lose. So you may not win in November.
I happen to think if you look at the numbers today, in particular,
well, sure, if you look at the numbers today, I would
hang on.
Yeah.
Not just that, you look at the fiasco. We have to do 2 things, just real briefly. We have 2 tracks that have to go down. Right, one is for the country.
Yeah.
This national security crisis we have with a commander-in-chief that's clearly not up to the job, and a constitutional crisis that will come with the 25th Amendment for that. That is something that has to go down this track. They also have a political situation over there. They're going to try to change Biden.
Are you worried that Democrats will?
I do think it's interesting that Bannon, given how Machiavellian Bannon is, he drops this reference to the 25th Amendment. That's interesting. Because my read of it is that employing the 25th Amendment with respect to Biden is a losing gambit. You're bailing him out. But if he sees that as... I would be inclined to trust Bannon's political instincts. And he kind of mentioned that offhand, but that kind of stood out to me there. Again, this is the first time I'm watching this, so I just heard it just now. I saw the tweet from Chip Roy, the Texas congressman, congressman, I don't remember, who said that he wants to get the 25th Amendment proceedings underway for Joe Biden, and everyone freaked out at it. Oh, you're just giving him you're bailing him out. So thinking about it, if you are able to force the 25th Amendment proceedings, then I wonder if this is an attempt to basically go on the offensive and give them there's already rats scattering from the ship. There's strife, there's division. There's 2 ways of looking at this. One, by taking the 25th Amendment angle, you're consolidating them. You're giving them something to consolidate around. But this is the case with any offensive action that you take. So that alone can't be sufficient to say, therefore, it's a bad idea. I suppose the thinking here could be, you're really forcing... It becomes impossible for anybody to not be aware of the issues with Biden. This runs a line with what Vivek has said before, that basically this needs to be, in order for this to be a victory, saying implicitly that there are shenanigans with the vote counting, if there's shenanigans with the vote counting, then the best way to go about this is to ensure that the actual votes themselves are so overwhelming that the shenanigans would be so obvious that they become impractical. And so perhaps that's the angle. You get, you bring this issue completely front and center, make sure that nobody is unaware of it. You have a president who's running for re-election who is actively trying to be removed for being mentally incompetent. And then everything everyone associates Joe Biden with is mental incompetence. So you're really forcing something in front of the actual voting public, which is, do you want to vote for this man? Because simultaneously, Bannon is also wanting to identify Trump with the entire movement, vested in a single man. And contrast this with, make it abundantly clear and obvious that this is an oligarchy, that you're voting for a corrupt, degenerate oligarchy. There's no voting for Biden. Biden isn't even a candidate isn't even a viable candidate. He's not even a person. You're just voting for his entire cabinet, which the Democrats are coming out themselves and saying. That was one of the clips I had that I'll play tomorrow. There's a former Obama, I think it was the Secretary of DHS under Obama, said, I don't care how incompetent Joe Biden is as long as he has Avril Haines and Samantha Power and all these people around him. So perhaps that's the angle here that they're taking. And I'm sure that these guys have access to polling data, and they're much closer to the actual understanding, like the voter sentiment toward alternatives to Biden. And I happen to be of the mind that there is no alternative. If there was, they would have already found it. The only thing better than an incompetent, bumbling dementia patient who rubber stamps everything for you, the only thing better than that would be a competent, vitalist, like respectable, honorable, admirable, whatever person who also rubber stamps everything for you. And there's nobody within the Democrat milieu right now who could take Biden's place, who could continue to rubber stamp everything like, say, a Gavin Newsom would, who isn't as repellent and horrible of a candidate as Gavin Newsom would be.
Replace Biden with somebody who'll be harder to beat. I was not a fan of doing this debate at this time, because I said you're given a free option. President Trump should debate who the Democratic Party nominee is, not a guy named Joe Biden. If it's Biden, do it. If it's Gretchen Whitmer, do it. If it's Gavin Newsom, Michelle Obama, you pick it. The Democrats should pick it. That's their choice. But President Trump, my belief is the incentive of the show that he did it for the country to show, because he took all the CNN rules, which I thought were crazy. He took the cut mic, he took the no audience. The rules may have helped him. He took the 2 breaks. Let's say this, he performed magnificently. But that was for the country. Now, as they try to change, first of all, he should never get on a debate stage with Joe Biden again. Been there, done that. But he won't be around. As they try to, my point is, we have a 100% certainty we could beat Biden and beat him big. Take the Senate and pick up seats in the House.
That was a very interesting cut. What did they leave out here?
If it's Gavin Newsom, Michelle Obama, you pick it. The Democrats should pick it. That's their choice. But President Trump, my belief is the incentive of the show that he did it for the country to show, because he took all the CNN rules, which I thought were crazy. He took the cut mic, he took the no audience. The rules may have helped him. He took the 2 breaks. Let's say this, he performed magnificently.
So there's a change in angle there, but they didn't cut.
But that was for the country. Now, as they try to change, first of all, he should never get on a debate stage with Joe Biden again. Been there, done that. But he won't be around.
There's a cut there. Been there, done that, but he won't be around. Who won't be around? Biden won't be around, or Trump won't be around? I can understand that as Biden won't be around because he'll have been taken out of the picture, or it could be Trump won't be around because he'll be in prison. And then what does he say?
As they try to, my point is, we have a 100% certainty we could beat Biden and beat him big. Take the Senate. But President Trump, my belief is the incentive of the show that he did it for the country to show, because he took all the CNN rules, which I thought were crazy. He took the cut mic, he took the no audience. The rules may have helped him. He took the 2 breaks. Let's say this, he performed magnificently. But that was for the country. Now, as they try to change, first of all, he should never get on a debate stage with Joe Biden again. Been there, done that. But he won't be around. As they try to, my point is, we have a 100% certainty we could beat Biden and beat him big. Take the Senate and pick up seats in the House.
Bannon reports to a federal prison in Danbury, Connecticut tomorrow. He told us he does not regret his refusal to comply with a congressional subpoena, and he says he considers himself a political prisoner, despite his conviction in federal court and his loss of multiple appeals.
It's very interesting. I wonder, it was a brief cut, but I wonder what they cut out of that, because it was a little awkward. And I don't see why they would have him speak at length on this whole subject, and then they cut out this little bit. It's very, very, I mean, if he was like stuttering or stammering or whatever, I don't see why they would have cut that out. And it's not like making the interview 12 minutes and 28 seconds instead of 12 minutes and 25 seconds would have made a big deal. It's interesting. Will says, what's Bannon like on Israel? I don't remember, honestly. I do think that I understand what the question is driving at. And my instinct would be, I'm pretty sure that he is a supporter of Israel in that he believes that Israel should exist. And more that he believes, I think he would recognize that going after Israel, trying to, how do I say this without just pissing everyone off? Making opposition to Israel a plank, going after that, making them into a scapegoat is what they want. They want to be the center of attention. The best way to remove, to whatever extent is possible, the effect of Israel on American policy is not to go on the warpath against Jews. It's to say, no, you have your country. Go enjoy your country. We love Israel. We want Israel to prosper and thrive. Go take your country. Go be a great, strong nation in the Middle East. We're great supporters of Israel. We think you should exist and you should be all hunky dory. That's the way to actually do it, because they don't want that. You're calling their bluff. They don't actually want that. They want America to exist for the sake of Israel. So it's like you giving them the rope that they don't want to hang themselves with. A couple more comments here. Witt says 25th Amendment puts Kamala in power and then they have to run her. Yeah, that could also be like you just take Biden out altogether, force them to go with someone much more unpopular, and force her to have to run, or force them to have to replace her with someone else. I saw they could, maybe with this new executive power, Joe Biden could unilaterally pack the court and make we're gonna promote Kamala to Supreme Court justice, and then that gives us the opportunity to put someone else in. Those are all very fanciful and potentially plausible, but these things are not. These things are not just kind of flip a switch and move the stuff around and just paper it over and just have the media run cover for everything, and everything will just be hunky dory for that's not the way any of this works. It's only in the minds of people who have a really low resolution, one-dimensional view of politics think that things work that way, but they don't. A $2 super chat from Fountainhead Forum. He says, how do I get Matt Erickson on my show? Let's see. Shoot me an email at realkingpilled@gmail.com. I've got a bunch of show commitments coming up here in the near future. I'm going to have some daytime work, so I'm probably going to have to cut down on some of my podcast appearances. But I've got to make time for doing interviews, getting other people on the show, because we need King Pill to keep going. We've been focusing a lot of time on the ASTROLABE lately, but I've got some interviews backed up for King Pill as well. Okay, so we're over the 2-hour mark, so we got to push forward here. Emily Galvin Almanza, a hyphenated American. She says, you may have heard the term Project 2025 floating around, and you may have even cracked open the 900-plus page document yourself, only to see a lot of kind of bland policy wonk text. So let me crack through the policy speak and tell you WTF is in this document. Now notice, this tweet's gotten 16.7 million views. This is viral. Like 16.7 million views. There's not many tweets that fall into this category. So Project 2025 has officially entered the mainstream. We've been talking about it for months here, and I thought it was interesting that the libs aren't really grabbing onto it. There's a few people randomly screeching about it here and there, but nobody's really giving it much credence. Now they are, because here's something that all these different Supreme Court opinions have had in common is they're basically paving the way for Project 2025. They're making things much easier on Project 2025. So now it's come onto the libs' radar. This is a long thread, but if you want a lot of info about Project 2025 all in one place, you've come to the right place. This document is what Trump and his team will do if elected. It's their document, their plan, their platform. So, like, it's not me saying what they'll do. This is them saying so. The millennial speak is nauseating. Shall we dig in? I'll organize and give you page numbers. I'm going to start with criminal justice stuff, of course, and then we'll wander through other topics like repro rights. None. No reproductive rights. Discrimination. fine unless it's against nuclear power. Environmental protection, gone, etc. So we will no longer be able to reproduce and the environment will disappear. Predictably, this is a document full of states' rights claims, but true to form, there is very little left to the states when it comes to a Trump criminal legal system. Generally, the Constitution reserves criminal law to the states, allowing localities to create criminal accountability as they see fit. But under a Trump regime, small government just means no EPA or Medicare and huge expansions of DOJ's criminal division power. A primary target? The discretion and decision-making of local prosecutors. Aha, isn't this interesting? People have talked for so long about George Soros and his agenda to subvert all the prosecutors in the U.S., and she's highlighting that, someone's fighting back. Prosecutorial discretion is part of the foundation of our legal system. The idea that the people elect their prosecutor and can elect or not elect a person whose judgment they agree with when it comes to what to focus on when it comes to criminal prosecution. Yes. The criminal prosecutors are just a manifestation of the will of the people. That's exactly what it is. The Trump DOJ will basically override local voters and prosecutors, bringing federal charges where they deem states not punitive enough. I should note that this is a ridiculous, massively difficult thing to do. Our criminal court system is spread across 3,143 counties. So what it really means is that the Trump DOJ will troll for cases they find politically meaningful and use the full weight of the federal government to prosecute specific individuals who stand for stuff they don't like. She tweeted this completely lacking in self-awareness. One of the best examples you ever see of how they cry out as they strike you. They're not just going to take on targeted prosecutions, they're also going to legally come after prosecutors who they feel aren't prosecuting enough. It's like this, but everywhere. And she links this Politico article, DeSantis suspended from his job. Suspended by DeSantis. Hold on. DeSantis suspended from his job. He wants voters to put him back in office. Tampa Democrat Andrew Warren has been locked in a protracted legal battle with the Republican governor after he was suspended from his elected position of state attorney in 2022. He was elected. Andrew Warren was a Democrat who was twice elected as Hillsborough County state attorney. In January, he said he would not run for another term because there was a chance DeSantis would suspend him again if he won. But 2 days after that announcement, a federal appeals court ruled against him, although the court did not reinstate him. I'm trying to remember what it was that what the issue was. Of course, it's not the fact that Politico is not telling me. It's just saying he suspended them is very telling. One of the reasons Warren was suspended was because he signed a pledge in 2022 vowing not to enforce the state's abortion laws, including a then recently enacted ban on abortion after 15 weeks without exceptions for rape or incest. So the prosecutor, we have this narrative that's been created for us that Project 2025 is going to go after the prosecutors. The prosecutors, they're just elected by the people. The people want them to prosecute. And they're not going to be allowed to do that. And here we have, as an example of the sort of thing we might get, is a prosecutor who's suspended by the executive because he signs a pledge saying he's not going to enforce the law. He also signed another pledge saying he would not prosecute anyone for providing gender-affirming care to transgender patients, even though at the time he signed the pledge, there were no laws covering those procedures. Florida would later institute a ban for minors. So he says, I will not enforce the law on these things that I decide. And this is an example of the sort of innocent voice of the people prosecutor that may get scooped up in the Project 2025 agenda. Whoops, forgot to accidentally unshared. Okay. And somehow they're also going to do everything they can to make sentences harsher and increase utilization of the death penalty. Wow, this Project 2025 thing sure seems good. They're going to double down on the war on drugs, prosecuting interstate drug cases much more harshly. And by interstate drug trade, they also mean mailing abortion pills. Based. They will also take election integrity out of the hands of the Civil Rights Division. And put it into the DOJ's criminal division, which means you see a lot more cases like Crystal Mason's, but at a federal level. Woman who received 5-year sentence in voter fraud case. How dare they prosecute the black woman for voter fraud? I won't even let me open it. Okay, let's continue. The long and short of this is, we often think of prosecution of political enemies as like Donald Trump sending DOJ after Liz Cheney or Rachel Maddow or something. And we forget that this can also mean persecution of ordinary people like Crystal Mason. What about ordinary people like, I don't know, Douglas Mackey? This is just an ordinary person, but we're told this doesn't matter. Now, I will say that this woman genuinely, I think she's sincere. I think she's honest. I think she's deluded, but I think she's honest. This is the thing about these people. It's not that they're like consciously engaging in this double standard. They're not even conscious enough to be aware that the standard even exists. It's simply the reality around them. People who are not high profile themselves, but whose conduct or even mistake is in a subject matter area that makes them the political target. Under this regime, being in a state that would not choose to prosecute them may be no help. It's also important to remember the ramifications of highly punitive policies. A DOJ that seeks the max on every case, seeks the death penalty, increases immigration detention, is a federal government expanding and lining the pockets of the prison industrial complex. We already live in a country where basically all social ills are funneled into our criminal court system. SCOTUS just increased that trend by allowing people who are living on the street with nowhere else to go to be prosecuted for existing outdoors. But in this administration, we could see an expansion of what is criminal. You'll see a lot of Torquemada-esque interrogatory stuff in the document, especially at Treasury. But the most obvious expansion of the criminal system is into the zone of women's health. In other words, reproductive rights, never heard of her. The document is pretty fixated on abortion, unsurprisingly, and with plans to end all forms of abortion access, including pills, throughout the document. This is her trying to raise the alarm about how terrible Project 2025 is, and she's just making it awesome. She's making the point that it's awesome. There's one point I'd like to hit on in particular. This week, SCOTUS punted a case back to Idaho, which was covered as a case allowing emergency abortions to save a woman's life. But in fact, that's not what really happened here. The court punted the issue back to the circuit court, leaving the question of whether women need to be actively dying to receive an abortion open. Wow, what a tyrannical Supreme Court. Reminder, long as there's legal uncertainty, there are doctors doing nothing while wondering what they're supposed to do as a woman lies bleeding and septic on their table. Yes, I'm sure that the doctors don't know what to do when a woman lies bleeding and septic on their table. This subject has been beaten to death, so I probably don't need to say anything, but just the absolute gall of these nitwits to take the conversation about abortion and treat it as the absolute tiny fraction of situations being the expansive whole of all the situations. Like, I'm sure that when a woman is lying bleeding and septic on their operating table, the doctors just don't know what to do. If that's the case, then we need new doctors. And those ones probably need to go like live in a cow pasture and eat grass. They could simply stop fighting for EMTALA, the statute that says hospitals that get federal dollars have to offer emergency care. Right, I'm sure. That isn't an interesting angle to take, being able to withhold federal dollars from hospitals that choose to engage in degeneracy. I would love to see that. And also in Project 2025, they want to go even farther than that, farther than banning abortion. They want to make sure doctors don't even know how to do it. Specifically, this doc makes the Department of Health and Human Services responsible for ensuring that training for doctors, nurses, and doulas doesn't include anything about abortion. Imagine that. Oh, and also DOJ is going to be the abortion police and go after anyone mailing abortion pills. The W's are just stacking up. Side note, I don't actually disagree with ensuring more coverage for things related to women's preventative health care, but Project 2025 weirdly endorsing the rhythm method is hilarious. She screenshots this. HHS should more thoroughly ensure that fertility awareness-based methods of family planning are part of women's preventative services under the ACA. FABMs often involve costs for materials and supplies, and HHS should make clear that coverage of those items is also required. FABMs are highly effective and allow women to make family planning choices in a manner that meets their needs and reflects their values. So they're going to make you have all these babies. They're going to make you have all these babies. Right. Yeah, no awareness of where babies come from. They're going to make you have all these babies. Who's going to take care of these babies? I don't know. Maybe the same people who've taken care of babies for the entire existence of the human race? Were you born yesterday? Were you thinking maybe you could get access to daycare? Oh no, mama, we want you to take care of the babies. Yes, if you birth a child, we want you to be responsible for it. Correct. What's that? You had a job? Don't you worry your pretty little head about it. Another screenshot quoting from the Project 2025 agenda. Prioritize funding for home-based childcare, not universal daycare. As HRSA's early childhood health page outlines, quoting, currently only about half of U.S. preschoolers are on track with their development and ready for school, and more than 1 in 4 of children, or 28%, who experience abuse or neglect are under 3 years old. Concurrently, children who spend significant time in daycare experience higher rates of anxiety, depression, and neglect, as well as poor educational and developmental outcomes. Instead of providing universal daycare, funding should go to parents, either to offset the cost of staying home with a child or to pay for familial in-home childcare. This woman thinks that it would be a bad thing if Americans are given money back that was taken from them in the first place to simply pay for them to stay home and take care of their own child. These people do not deserve a voice. These people do not deserve to vote. These people do not deserve citizenship. They need to earn it by proving that they are not completely insane and deranged. She somehow twisted herself into a pretzel to say, you being allowed to stay home and take care of your child and be given tax money back to you to support that or to get family to come care for your child for you. This is a bad thing. This is antinatalism on steroids, and these people ought to be ushered completely out of polite society. HHS now, under Trump, thinks the gay agenda is destroying families, but the presence of a biological father can prevent all manner of bad things up to and including teen pregnancy. Presumably because dad is going to meet your date at the door with a shotgun. Oh, horrors! Fathers will be expected to act like fathers. They will be incentivized to act like fathers. Notice that there's no actual engagement with the data that's presented. Just screeching. But also, having an adult male father figure who is not your bio dad is apparently the worst and most evil thing in the world. Ban boyfriends. Oh, yes, Project 2025 is going to ban boyfriends. Let's see what they're actually saying. Goal number 3, promoting stable and flourishing married families. For those of you who haven't seen what the Project 2025 stuff is all about, part of the utility of a thread like this is she's going to highlight the most important stuff for us. So you don't have to go read 900 pages. They have this uncanny ability to pick out the exact things that are the best about it because they're ideologically predisposed to wanting the worst things for humanity at all times in all places. So here's what Project 2025 says. Goal number 3, promoting stable and flourishing married families. Families comprised of a married mother, father, and their children are the foundation of a well-ordered nation and healthy society. Unfortunately, family policies and programs under President Biden's HHS are fraught with agenda items focusing on LGBTQ plus equity, subsidizing single motherhood, disincentivizing work, and penalizing marriage. These policies should be repealed and replaced by policies that support the formation of stable, married, nuclear families. Working fathers are essential to the well-being and development of their children, but the United States is experiencing a crisis of fatherlessness that is ruining our children's futures. In the overwhelming number of cases, fathers insulate children from physical and sexual abuse, financial difficulty or poverty, incarceration, teen pregnancy, poor educational outcomes, high school failure, and a host of behavioral and psychological problems. By contrast, homes with non-related boyfriends present are among the most dangerous place for a child to be. HHS should prioritize married father engagement in its messaging, health, and welfare policies. I don't see how you can possibly be a conscious human being with the remotest amount of inclination for virtue and somehow draw a black pill out of this. And again, no engagement on the substance because there is no substance in this mind. There's just programming. The programming is not capable of recognizing, yes, having a non-related male around children is not a recipe for good outcomes. Imagine putting this into the animal kingdom. We're going to have this a bear or a lion or a chimp. We're going to have a male chimp surrounded by and tasked with the care and nurture of a bunch of chimps, baby chimps that he has no relationship to. I'm sure this won't end poorly. In the context of current and emerging reproductive technologies, HHS policies should never place the desires of adults over the right of children to be raised by the biological fathers and mothers who conceived them. That's a fantastic framing. The children have a right to be raised by their biological fathers and mothers. In cases involving biological parents who are found by a court to be unfit because of abuse or neglect, the process of adoption should be speedy, certain, and supported generously by HHS. The Trump administration would like to make the federal government close its eyes, put its fingers in its ears, and hum loudly when anyone says gender. Specifically, they will scrub out any mention of the existence of trans, non-binary, LGBTQIA+ Americans in federal agencies, policies, regulations, and legislation. Exceptionally based. To quote, the terms sexual orientation and gender identity, diversity, equity, and inclusion, gender, gender equality, gender equity, gender awareness, gender sensitive, abortion, reproductive health, reproductive rights. These terms are getting cut out of every rule, federal rule, agency regulation, contract, grant, regulation, and piece of legislation that exists. Damn, who's the language police now? Oh, you got us. Oh, man. We were hypocrites. Oh well. This document, in a quest to be really, really fundamentalist about gender identity, almost completely abandons the idea of supporting gender equality as a whole. Efforts to protect women and girls internationally? Hell no. Damn straight. The United States government is not responsible for protecting women and girls internationally. Except for where it means not actively trying to make their lives worse and bomb them and subvert their societies and kill all of their husbands and sons. That's right. Correct. Supporting gender equality is retarded. Like, USAID should, quote, remove all references, examples, definitions, photos, and language on all USAID websites, in agency publications and policies, and in all agency contracts and grants that include the following terms. And the terms are gender, gender equality, gender equity, gender diverse individuals, gender aware, gender sensitive. They would very much like to kick trans people and anyone gender nonconforming out of the military. Remember Demi Moore and G.I. Jane? Yeah, the second she gets that buzz cut, she's out. Oh no! Oh no! We can't have a woman with a buzz cut in the military. How about this? No women in the military. Whatsoever. Women do not belong in the military. Any society that has women in its military has failed. A military exists specifically so that women don't have to fight wars. That's why you have a military in the first place. What about race discrimination, you say? Well, we will have no idea because the Trump administration plans to stop collecting any data about that. The EEOC will stop collecting data about race entirely. Ha-ha! By the way, when I say this is a tricky document, this is what I mean. The document justifies ditching any data collection by saying that, quote, crudely categorizing employees by race or ethnicity fails to recognize the diversity of the American workforce and forces individuals into categories that do not fully reflect their racial and ethnic heritage. Which, at first glance, a person could be like, yes, racial identity is complex. Let's not put people in boxes. But then you step back and realize that no longer having data about whether black and brown people are or are not getting hired does exactly zero good things. It just makes us unable to tell if bad things are happening. I happen to believe that all millennials... I shouldn't say that. I was going to Fed post about millennials, but I won't do that. Josiah says, this platform is ridiculously encouraging. That's what I'm saying. Like, even falling short of this would be a massive move forward. Witt says this is all insanity that this has to even be said. Right. The document is full of this, really normal-sounding pablum that actually means we are choosing to have no idea whether black and brown people are being shut out of the workforce. Why would the government want to know that? Right, because black and brown people are going to be shut out of the workforce. If the longhouse isn't hanging over everyone, nannying them, and finger-wagging at them, then people aren't going to hire black and brown people. The government doesn't need to know because they don't think disparate impact when a particular group is disadvantaged in the workplace matters anyway. Correct. It doesn't. They would, quote, eliminate disparate impact as a valid theory of discrimination for race and other bases under Title VII and other laws. Disparities do not and should not legally imply discrimination per se. Based. By the way, on this point, they get hella weird. I hate millennials. By the way, on this point, they get hella weird about the idea of racial equity at the Treasury Department, where they would essentially like to have an inquisition Ha! An inquisition in the Treasury Department. You're getting me excited. Identify every Treasury official who participated in DEI initiatives and interview him or her for the purpose of determining the scope and nature of these initiatives and to ensure that such initiatives are completely ended. Make public immediately all communications relating to the work of the Treasury's critical race theory and DEI initiatives. Treat the participation in any critical race theory or DEI initiative without objecting on constitutional or moral grounds as per se grounds for termination of employment. Expose and make public all training materials and initiatives designed to single out any race, ethnicity, or sex for special treatment. The administration should eliminate the 25-member Treasury Advisory Committee on Racial Equity. There is a 25-member Treasury Advisory Committee on Racial Equity. What do you guys think? Are you as excited about this as I am? Essentially, under this administration, any agency that wants to think about whether race is playing a role in the fairness of their sector can GTFO. Damn straight, woman. If you go to the original doc and search for DEI, you basically enter a forest of grandpas yelling, I don't see color, you could be black, white, green, purple, or polka dot for all I care. You can really see the world that this woman lives in, which again is not the real world. These are people who are living in a sheltered little fantasy, and that fantasy is dying. Don't treat them like serious people. Make fun of them. Mock them. By the way, you were hoping that a Democratic Senate would be an effective check to some kind. First thing in this doc is that they want to kind of tell the Senate to fuck off. Specifically, the plan is to get Trump loyalist appointees into position, scrap the Senate confirmation process for a lot of these appointees, and let the rest start working even before Senate confirmation. All of the agency heads are clearly designated as political in this doc, not expert or neutral. She notices the document designates all agency heads as political because there's no such thing as an expert or neutral person. Of course, they're political. So EPA, DOJ, FBI, HUD, and DOL, basically the doc calls for the insertion of as many loyalists as possible. And yes, the job of these loyalists is, in many cases, to dismantle the agency they head. Now, I don't expect this to be a one-for-one installation of the Project 2025 agenda. Of course it won't be. But, again, imagine 20% of this. And she didn't even touch on all of it. There's so much more than just this. Most of it is wonkery that she's not even capable of wrapping her mind around. Josiah says, I'm pessimistic by nature. Hearing this from the Heritage Foundation is surreal, almost euphoric. Yeah. These are the people who are putting together this, who are saying this is our agenda. These are the people who the gray America, Silicon Valley, tech people, the investment and commercial banking sector, the Fed, large parts of the Pentagon, these are the people that they're aligning themselves with. So when we're talking about them having to make compromises because they recognize the necessity of Trump, this is what they're compromising with. There is a tremendous amount of financial investment and Republican NGO backing. This is something like 90 different Republican NGOs. Charlie Kirk figures prominently among them. Witt says, this woman's archetype is why I had to quit Facebook in Obama's second term. Yeah. Straight Buster says, I promise every company with DEI initiatives will quickly, cleanly, and easily get rid of them without complaints because they don't actually care, only because they were told to do it. That's exactly correct. You're already seeing it happen. Did you notice that Pride Month was far less, like it wasn't like it was non-existent, but it wasn't nearly as overt and overbearing as it has been in the past. There isn't public will for a lot of these things. We've been conditioned to believe they are, but you even have the people who recognize the fundamental propaganda role of the media, and they see through it and this is all fake and gay, and these are things that are just being forced on people that they don't actually want. But then if you suggest that the vast majority of people don't actually want this and will just drop it, they're so dedicated to having to guzzle black pills at all times. No, it'll stick. They'll come up with some other way. Or maybe people will just let go of it because they don't care about it. If you actually believe these things are as deranged and insane as they are, then it's not a far leap to say, yeah, people are just going to move on from it. Especially as they're dealing with their own consequence crisis. People care much less about the racial breakdown of the department that they live in, or the department that they work in, or the neighborhood that they live in. If the economy is stable and they're being pulled out of instability, they're being given the money and the peace of mind to actually just carve out a life. These are products of a culture that is not aware that it's on the brink of collapse and catastrophe. As more and more people become aware of that, these things just disappear because they're luxuries. They're luxury goods luxury bads, I suppose, that will just give them something different and they'll forget about it. Baron Strawberry, how do you handle black pill addicts? I make fun of them. I mock them. Because being addicted to black pills is exceptionally gay. All right, last thing for the day here. We're coming up on 3 hours. Goodness sakes. Okay. This is hilarious. This will be fairly quick, but there's a Twitter account here, DEI for white guys. Networking to increase the diversity of corporate and government DEI programs by including white people. Ask how, DMs open. Email DEI4whiteguys@gmail.com. So they don't have the domain DEI for white guys. It's just a Gmail account. A how-to guide on making your company's DEI department self-destruct. Search your company's name and the word diversity. In this example, we'll use Home Depot. So here's the result. Diversity, equity, inclusion at the Home Depot. Number 2, scroll through their DEI page and find their employee network groups. They likely have one for Black, Asian, Latino, Indigenous, LGBT, disabled, women, seniors, and veterans. Home Depot calls them associate resource groups. Now, it's funny. This post violated the X rules. So this is number 3. It disappeared. What might they have said to violate the X rules? Well, someone screenshotted it down here. Find out who your company's chief diversity or people officer is and get their email. You can find it in their company's directory or LinkedIn. Derek Bottoms is the chief diversity officer of Home Depot. So I'm guessing that probably what this was taken down for is doxing. That's the only thing I could think of. I do happen to know that there is still Elon has fired a bunch of people from Twitter and made Twitter run much better, and it's improving. But there's still a war going on within Twitter, and there's still plenty of people in there who are acting as subversives. In this case, I think this is probably attributable to just an algorithm. There's an algorithm that says doxing, and they violate the doxing algorithm, so it gets taken down. There's been a number of these lately where someone posted something, for example, a video of a child being hurt. And so it automatically gets removed because it's content of a child being hurt, and they don't want content of children being hurt on the platform. Well, if you're like, oh, well, I'm just posting it for people's awareness, and I shouldn't have my account taken down for that. Well, those people, they did have their accounts restored. But I would say, don't post videos of children being hurt. Don't post videos of men pissing on each other in the streets. If you actually recognize these things as awful and terrible and degenerate, then quit broadcasting them. I know you might think that I'm raising awareness. No, you don't need to raise awareness of these things. If you claim that you don't want to see porn on the platform, then don't post a video of naked men pissing on each other in the streets. Oh, can you believe that they would have this out in public? Here, let me put it out in public for everyone to see. You've got to have like just the remotest amount of self-awareness. What I do think is a significant change, and then we'll get back to the thread here, is that when these sorts of things happen, they're addressed. Elon is available. People will tag him and stuff, and he'll respond, and he'll say, this is what happened. It's going to be fixed. I think that's a good thing. If you disagree, you're wrong. I'm sorry. Number 4, using their own DEI language, email your chief diversity officer from your company email and ask if there is an approved process, standard, or procedure to create an employee network group, and that you'd like to create one for people of European descent or who identify as white. You can see where this is going. Here's an example of such an email to Derek Bottoms, Home Depot's chief diversity officer. Mr. Bottoms, I recently learned that Home Depot has associate resource groups which promote our our culture of inclusion, support diversity, and help drive employee engagement through fostering professional development, raising cultural awareness, celebrating diversity, and offering community outreach opportunities. As far as heritage ARGs are concerned, I saw that we have an ARG for African American, Hispanic, Native American, and Asian American associates. I would like to contribute and help increase the diversity of the ARG program and promote Home Depot's culture of inclusion by creating an ARG that includes, represents, celebrates, fosters professional development, raises cultural awareness, and offers community outreach opportunities for my heritage, Americans of European descent and/or who identify as white. Is there an approved process, standard, or procedure for creating a new ARG? Thank you for your time. This template can be used for virtually every major corporation in America. They're all set up the same way in compliance with ESG scoring. The purpose of this is threefold. One, getting representation for white people that's afforded to every other group on the basis of race. Two, having them tell you no or retaliating against you for requesting the same thing they offer to every other group based on race, which gives you standing to sue. Three, they cut off their nose to spite their face and end their DEI programs because they would rather do away with it all than afford the same privileges to white people as a collective. This is something that you could do to actually put a little money behind your words. Instead of just complaining about it all, go come up with some clever way to make it self-destruct, especially if you know that a lot of cover for this may be incoming. Giving standing to sue on this basis would be fantastic. There's plenty of lawyers out there who will represent you, and it seems that there's plenty of will within the legal institutions to support this. If they allow you to try to create one, believing you can't on your own, we at DEI for White Guys can help you through the process of complying with their standards and procedures. If they deny you or retaliate against you, we can help connect you with pro bono lawyers who are in the anti-DEI space. We are not a law firm. We don't give legal advice. We won't ask for your info or for your employer's info unless you want to share it. But we will also not ask you to do something we haven't already done ourselves and are still employed. DEI departments are expecting individual white people to complain about or oppose its DEI policies, which violates company policies and your terms of employment, but they never envisioned we'd collectivize and ask for equal treatment. This is the safest, most effective, and most respectful way to fight for white advocacy and protect yourself in the process. Make them live up to their own words and standards. So, I want to put that out there for anybody who wants to have some fun and maybe actually accomplish a little something in the process. Mr. Westford said, "This is glorious." I agree. I'm glad you guys think so. Memetics is real and powerful. Just keep building and others will emulate, Witt says. And he says, black pills are buzzkills. I was one for a decade. Thanks, Peter Schiff. Well, I'm glad that you're pulling yourself out of that. We're coming up on the 3-hour mark, so I gotta get out of here. I have a phone call that I'm late for. So appreciate you guys staying here, hanging through the technical difficulties. We'll be back tomorrow. I've already got some good stuff lined up for it, and I'm sure I'll accumulate some more in the meantime. Go join the King Pill Discord. We haven't seen the hype man today, so I'll do his job for him. Join the King Pill Discord. We have a lot of fun in there. We'd love to have you. Go to kingpill.com and sign up. We'll be doing another Schizo stream this Friday evening. If you'd like to join that, then any subscription tier will get you in there. And we'll be back tomorrow. Like the stream for me, will you? 61 viewers right now, 43 likes. A few of you still need to hit the like button.